You don't have to worry about that. So let's go ahead and get into it. I'm going to be starting with just the order that Hearthpwn has gone in here. So they've kind of separated them at the start by sort of the multi-cards things, which is this one's the Grimy Goons, usable by Warrior, Hunter, and Paladin. And that's what's noted by this color right here. If you take a look at Don Honcho right here. So if you look at Don Honcho, I think I have to scroll with the keyboard actually to get that right. Yeah, there we go. So if you look at Don Honcho here with the yellowish, the reddish, and the greenish, this is the Paladin, Warrior, Hunter colors right here. And once you actually get into a game, depending on what class you're playing, that whole backdrop will change colors to whatever class you're playing to let it know that. So that's kind of how that works. But right away, this guy is kind of an interesting card. 7 mana is 5/6, and Battlecry, give a random minion in your hand +5/+5. This is sort of the start of the mechanics for, like, we haven't seen this sort of thing before, which is really toying, or trying to heavily toy with cards that aren't necessarily in play yet. We've seen this with Cthulhu, we've seen this with the Mistcaller, but nothing that's really dedicated heavily onto one particular card. And that's something that really opens up a dynamic for some of the earlier cost cards that you would play in order to get to the later stages of the game. So there's a card you'll see later on. It's a 1 mana 2/2 with Death Rattle, restores 4 health to each player. And that card's obviously really powerful at contesting the early game, and it scales and drops off pretty heavily shortly after that, though. But if you have cards like Don Honcho that can bring buffs to these early game cards, one of two things can happen. And number one is you can kind of stack your mid to late game cards to be more powerful than the ones your opponents are going to have. Or in some situations, it's going to be helping buff up these early utility cards that you have and having them be super powerful afterwards. So one of the cards that I look at when I see this is, how does this operate with, say, Acolyte of Pain? Is this a liability at times? Do you want to buff something like that? And that's a question that I think you have to look at deck building and see where everything's going to change, because we have a lot of new mechanics that are coming up in ways that are like there to fight for these late game situations with Jade Golem specifically. And you're going to be put in situations where maybe Control Warrior is moving away from sort of this Acolyte of Pain game where you don't necessarily need to draw cards, you'd actually be hitting synergies. But if that's not the case, and you have Don Honcho in one of your builds because it happens to be very good, is this a card you really want to play in one of those late game control decks at that point? Because Acolyte of Pain oftentimes is a card that you just literally are not playing in a Control Warrior mirror. And so if that's the case, Don Honcho at times is going to buff that Acolyte of Pain that's in your hand. You're not going to get any use from it because drawing the cards is going to be oftentimes worse than just having a big body in play. So there's a lot of little things to think about, I think, with some of these cards, and this is really a good example of where that starts. I'm not saying that Don Honcho is going to get absolutely played or anything. To be honest, I don't think it's that strong of a card. But the thing about it is, if I'm wrong about this, and a lot of people, I think, are sharing the same opinion I do, just not going to be that strong, this is one of those cards that is going to change the way that you build some of your decks when it fits into these control decks. You know, I see this as, whoa, Relask. 12 months in a row. Let me make sure I get my alerts above where these cards are. Bam, PogChamp with 1 year of love for Relask. Fightless Womits and Fightless God blesses. And welcome Relask back to the esports gaming team. And believe it or not, weekly sub count goes up for the week. We are now at 5 of 6 subscribers. We just need one more to hit our goal. Hashtag cap, hashtag sellout. But Don Honcho is really Maybe I should have held some time at the beginning of this to start this discussion. And Danza for 12,345 with 10 months in a row. Fightless Womits and Fightless God blesses, and welcome these two back to the esports gaming team with 6 and 10 months of love respectively. And believe it or not, that brings our weekly sub count up for the week. We are now at 7 of 8 subscribers, just one more to hit our goal. Hashtag Kappa, hashtag sellout. But the kind of the broad point I wanted to hit here with this is that Don Honcho in situations like this is often going to change the way that you're building your deck. And that's, I think, one of the more interesting aspects of Hearthstone in general, is the first step you take before you ever even play a card, which is what cards are you going to play with? And so this is a shining example of sort of the direction this could take. Let me turn this light off and get some natural light in here from the sun outside. It's peeking out a little bit now. Here in beautiful sunny California, 12:23 p.m. Pacific time. It's a wonderful day out here and on the West Coast, and if you're here as well, I hope you enjoy. Dwayne, what's going on, man? Let me mod Dwayne real quick. Whoa! What's up, Google? Didn't show my information there. I need to remember not to click my mouse buttons. Apparently, it jumps back on Google when that happens. For those of you who don't know, Dwayne is an incredible Hearthstone player and a very fun guy to hang out with. If you guys haven't checked him out, make sure you throw him a follow and check him out on Twitter as well. Dwayne is the man. Dwayne called the Draw Babbling book into Polymorph while we were at the World Championships. Before it happened, he says he's going to draw Babbling book and he's going to hit Polymorph. And we were just like, shut up, that's not going to happen. Drew Babbling book, writing a polymorph. I swear the guy's a prophet in some ways. You hang out with casters long enough, that's what ends up happening. Casters make those crazy calls. Anyways, Don Honcho is going to a lot of times change the way that you build or look at a particular build and go that direction. And I think that's sort of the purpose of a lot of the cards that you're seeing in the set is this thematic purpose where it changes the way that you're thinking about the game and changing the way that you're looking at the game. And to me, that's like one of the most important aspects of a card game is not necessarily just to have new and exciting things happen, but to have new and exciting things to just think about. You know, one of the things that's awesome about Hearthstone is when you're sitting at work or you're on a bus or you're waiting in line to buy green beans at the grocery store because you forgot them 20 minutes earlier when you were cooking dinner, you can think about the game and you're getting this experience that you can't quite get like when you're thinking about, say, I don't know, basically any other game that's not a card game. It's really hard to think about those and get the same sort of feeling that you get from Hearthstone because honestly, most of the time you spend with Hearthstone is spent thinking about Hearthstone, not actually playing Hearthstone. And to me, the fact that is so entertaining to begin with is already kind of crazy. But this is like another one of those things where I think this direction overall is pretty good with the way that design philosophy fits. So I think this is a really good way to start exploring that. Overall, though, I don't think it's a very strong card. What's going on here? Why isn't this working the way I want it to? There we go. So next one, similar boat with the Paladin, Warrior, Hunter. Trifecta here. Battlecry, give a random in your hand +1/+1. At a 3-mana 2/4, this is just pretty overall fairly weak. I don't really see playing this over many other options. 3-drop slot. I'm not going to quite give credit to +1/+1 being that powerful in someone's hand. Overall, this is just sort of to explore that theme again. You know, there's something that you have to think about when you're looking at new cards is that the sets are designed for all sorts of purposes. And one of the main purposes of cards that are there is to give you an idea of the direction the set's going. And so because this is a very commonly encountered card, you're going to see it have this effect on there to kind of introduce people to this mechanic. And then as you move your way up, you end up running into cards like Don Honcho, where if this is a mechanic that ends up being something that you like, you have a very powerful option for it at the top end now. But overall, this card's pretty weak. Don't really think too much of it. Not going to give it too much discussion. And then this is the start of where the Discover ones come in for these classes. So you can play this in Paladin, Warrior, or Hunter, and this Battlecry is going to discover you one card from one of those classes. And so that's something that is the first step into branching over classes into other ones now. We had an example of this with Grand Crusader in Grand Tournament, which was just a 6-mana 5/5. It said you add a random Paladin card to your hand. Okay, kind of a weird card, but is there any chance that random Paladin cards could benefit, say, Mage, for instance? Well, we saw Jab play his at the time it was called Casino Mage, if I recall correctly. It was like a Casino Mage deck, and he literally played Grand Crusader in the top 8 of North America, and that card was at times providing huge benefits for him. Something like that is just cards from other classes can have effects in a way with another class's set of cards that are really weird and completely change outcomes and directions you can go. And so this is kind of the first branch into that heavily, where we're going to be seeing quite a few Paladin and Warrior cards being played in Hunter and so on and so forth all the way around. Yeah, High Roll Mage Join. I think it's a really good name for it. But that's sort of the direction that I see cards like this taking, is maybe before long they can actually, if this is something that's really well received, they can print cards that are literally a Paladin or a Warrior card, and it's a weapon that, like say in traditional World of Warcraft, either one of those classes could have wielded. I think that's something that's really interesting to look at and see where that direction goes. What's up, Addy? But that's sort of the idea I see these cards going, is that they're trying to just introduce new ways to think about the game. Like, on average, is there a card from Paladin or Warrior that you may want in a Hunter build? Probably not, but is there a card in Paladin or Warrior that you may want from Hunter? Well, Savannah Highmane seems like a pretty good way to break some of those late-game standstills where a lot of it comes down to say, Ragnaros timing in those instances. Maybe there's different ways to do that, and so this kind of opens that possibility up a little bit more. I like the direction this card's going. I could talk more about Discover forever, but I'll kind of save that for when I get into more deep subjects here. But Discover overall, it's a good and a bad mechanic, I think. But for the most part, I think it provides more benefits than anything else. Bada Bay, what's going on? So then the Cabal is going to be the next set of these. These are going to be used by Warlock, Mage, and Priest, which is denoted once again by the colors. You see the blue for the Mage, the whitish or slight off-whitish for the Priest, and then the rich purple color for the Warlock here. And the Cabal Chemist, I think, is probably one of the more interesting ones, where it says add a random potion to your hand. And so when you think about a card like this, one of the first ones that jumps to mind for me is Zeril from from what's the last set called? I can't think of the name of this for the life of me now. I'll just open up the shop and take a look. Whispers of the Old Gods. So Zeraal Poison Mind gave you 1 of 5 different little kind of expendable 1-cost spells that you could use to do different effects. The Cabal Chemist I thought may have worked in that same way, but at Common it felt really weird that this was such a wide catalog of cards. I think that the complication of this card is whoa, don't do that, is a little bit big. So I'm kind of curious, like, why this was actually at Common. It's more of a criticism than a review, I guess. But this adds like a random potion card to your hand, and we'll see the potions as you go along with it. But it basically refers to any of the potions that they printed in this set. Which, if that's going to be the case, I would have loved to see actually like a subtype potion on them, so I knew that's what they were getting. Because frankly, I had no idea what this is actually grabbing, and I haven't actually read all 132 cards yet, so there actually might be new potions that I still have no idea it can grab. But it's grabbing a random one of those. So that's pretty cool. You can get like you can get the Warlock ones, you can get the Mage ones. There's all kinds of potions that we'll be coming up with. So it's hard for me to really evaluate this card without having read the entire set first, since it's specifically referencing other things within the set. But overall, 4-mana 3/3 that draws a card is pretty tough to be a bad card, to be perfectly honest with you. I'd expect this to see some play a little bit early on, and if it ends up fitting in the right builds, it fits in the right builds, but otherwise may fall to the wayside. Kazakus, another card that I would love to talk in depth about, but this is like a super specific card, and it's really cool. So it's got the Reno mechanic of it in it. If your deck contains no duplicate copies, then you get to create a custom spell. No, it is not referring to if there are no duplicates the Mage card in your deck. It means duplicate copies. So for instance, if you build a deck of all 1-ofs, Kazakus is always going to activate. But say you have 2 Frostbolts in your deck, and then 28 unique cards afterwards. You'll need to draw Frostbolt prior to Kazakus being able to activate. Now, Kazakus, when it says create a custom spell, there's only a couple steps to this I know so far, which is number 1, you choose a 1-cost, a 5-cost, or a 10-cost spell. That's step number 1. So once you've chosen that, you then get a selection of 3 effects that you attach to that 1, 5, or 10-cost spell. After you choose one of those effects, you then get another set of effects that you want to add to it, but you cannot get the same effect twice. And what I mean by that is, if, say, your first one said draw a card, I'm not saying it's one of the options, but let's just say this. Let's say one of the options is draw a card. You will not get, if you choose draw a card, you will not get draw a card ever as an option on the second one. But say you passed on that one on the first section of creating the card, it can sometimes appear there during the second part of it. So the interesting thing about this card is that when you're crafting a random spell, this is very much taking into account all facets of the game right now. It's taking into account a macro perspective, where how does the entire game plan work out, and what's my goal from an overhead perspective. And then number 2, am I in a situation where I need to do something right now, and do I have to necessarily take a risk in order to get that done? And so that's a card I think that is really unique and really surprising that they could capture so much in one card, where in micro situations where it's turn by turn and you're having to think of little tiny things and hand reading and how the game is panning out and what you've used so far and what you anticipate them having left, versus do I need something colossally powerful in order to get the game done in this time. And so those are 2 huge aspects of one card that was managed to be captured by one single thing. And the thing that's cool to me is this wasn't a Mage, Priest, or Warlock card. It's all 3 of them. You have to play it in one of those 3 classes, but my gosh, is Kazakus cool, and I'm really looking forward to this one and seeing how it pans out. I'm not quite sure it's going to be super powerful, but it does give you a lot of options for sort of building that Reno theme, where you have more of a toolbox of things available in your deck, and sort of a wider range of threats, so that it's a little bit harder for your opponent to peg exactly what your deck list will be until these become super refined. I think it's really cool. But oddly, both of his second layers had 2 repeats, and he didn't pick... Oh yeah, that's Sour Surf. I think it's going to happen. I don't know how many options there are. I'd venture to say there's probably like 9-ish options, you know, like one kind of representing what each class might do. So that's something to really think about. But I am curious to see the rest of this card. Again, very tough for me to evaluate it other than from a design perspective and how nice I think the card is, without knowing every single thing it can do and putting that in application. Like, imagine how many different outcomes you get. Let's just say there's 9. And let's say there's only 1 cost you could choose. That'd be 9. How do you do that math on there? There's 9, 8, 7, 6. There's 9, 8, 7 combinations. 9 times 8 times 7. Is that right? Somebody write a formula for that. Say there are 9 different options and you have to pick 2 of them. The first one, you get all 9. The second one, just think about how many different things there are to do with it. It's just, like, I don't even know the math, and I don't even want to think about it because it's kind of giving me a headache right now. There's a lot of stuff you can do with this card, so this is probably going to be one that is one of the most toyed with legendaries, probably like in the game as a result of that. Plus, it's just super cool. Cabal Courier, another one of the Mage, Priest, Warlock cards. So kind of in that same vein as we saw from the first one. 3 mana 2/2, discover a Mage, Priest, or Warlock card. Lapalato, wow, this guy's fat. Not quite as fat as I used to be, man. I've lost 80 pounds, so I'm doing something right. Maybe just look at the beard. The beard does weigh about 36 of those pounds, so if I trim it, maybe I could lose a little bit more. I think you're onto something, Lapalito. Or Lapilato. Lopilido? Lop-il-ato? Lopil-ato? I don't know how to pronounce your name, man. No, don't worry about him. I don't really care what he says. Alright, mods, you want to ban him? You guys have full control. I've trusted you fully with what you want to say. Point is, this card is, again, fitting that same vein of what I talked about earlier. So if you're interested in kind of the thoughts, just refer to all the same ones I did with the Paladin card. It's just sort of an interesting card. 3 cost, 2/2 that can replace itself. Cards that replace themselves have proved to be very useful in a lot of situations, including Swashbuckler and including Babbling Book. Those are 2 cards that, frankly, are not very strong, but they're good enough to get the job done. And so that's always something to think about. Anytime a card replaces itself, it's almost certainly worth looking at. Strange Folk, what's going on, man? Yeah, thank you very much. I've been working on it since May, and it's been going fantastic. Yeah, Famaro, you haven't missed much, man. We're just right into it. I started the stream at noon, but I had some stuff to talk about and some things to go from there. So you haven't missed much so far. We haven't really gotten into like the meat of the set yet, so that's something to really take into account. Where's Admirable and what have you done with him? He's right here, and the only thing that looks different is that I have a gigantic freaking beard. It's a little bit bigger than normally is, honestly. Thanks for November for encouraging me not to do anything. So Jade Lotus, this is going to be the 3rd set of the 3 class cards, which these ones are going to be Shaman, Druid, and Rogue. These are the classes that mostly focus on Jade Golem stuff, and so we're seeing that right away with the Legendary that's present, and my gosh, does it seem powerful. 6 mana, 5/3, Battlecry, and Death Rattle, summon a Jade Golem. So for those of you who don't know how Jade Golems work, the first Jade Golem that's made it for in a game for you is going to be a 1/1. For each Jade Golem that you make, it cumulatively adds +1/+1 to the Jade Golems. So the first one will be a 1/1, the second one will be a 2/2, the second one will be a 3/3, and then so on and so forth. So that is a lot of Jade Golem stuff that could be going on in these situations. I'm talking like a ton of Jade Golem stuff. When they previewed the image for it, they showed it scaling from a 1/1 to a 30/30, and people kind of looked at this and go, how do you make a 30/30 Jade Golem? It doesn't even make sense. Well, we'll get to that later on, but there's a lot of stuff going on with Jade Golems. And my gosh, if you thought Cairn was good, holy moly is Aya Blackpaw good. Not only does it give you more effective board presence immediately in Jade Golem style decks, but the Death Rattle on it is going to scale based on when your opponent kills this card. So if your opponent doesn't want to kill this card because you're getting a Jade Golem they can't handle, think about what that means as you continue to play Jade Golem cards. This is a card that, honestly, if you're not too far behind, forces your opponent to deal with this in a timely and efficient manner, and that is sick. That is something really powerful to think about when you look at a card like this, just this mechanic in general. We're going to get to some more of the cards later, but holy moly, this one's smoking. Thanks for the view, Admirable. Well, thank you, Zarina. It's my pleasure. This is one of my most enjoyable parts of the game, is being able to just explain things. I think explaining things is probably something I like more than just about anything else in the world. Jade Golems and Druid should be interesting. A lot of people are kind of giving this idea that Jade Golems are like really overpowered. But something to think about is when you're kind of just playing big, clunky, statted stuff, we have some historical examples of this not necessarily lasting. At the beginning of Whispers of Old Gods, for instance, or just the beginning of the game. Let's go back to that point. Beginning of the game, Cairn was not at all on anyone's radar in terms of a powerful card. Eventually, that started to get onto people's radar, that this was a difficult card to actually handle if your opponent didn't have a strong way to do so, and as a result, started to see some play. And then as people started to figure out how you actually fought against Cairn, it started to rotate back out as a favorable choice of threat. And if you look at Whispers of the Old Gods, a more recent example, that's still the case. When Flamewreath Faceless came out, that was a dominant card. I mean, it was in every single Shaman deck, and people were struggling to handle it. But as time went on, you saw Flamewreath Faceless really kind of fall by the wayside and not really take as big of effect as people thought it was going to have. And now it's at the point to where Shaman decks are not even including Flaming Faceless in the builds. And then let's just look at Cthulhu builds in general, where Cthulhu builds kind of did the same thing. Early on, they were very easy to build because the cards kind of spelled themselves out, and you could just figure out which ones were more and less powerful. But as time went on, Cthulhu really started to fall out of favor. And so the first couple of weeks that this set is out, you're gonna get pummeled by some Jade Golems, and you're gonna do some pummeling with Jade Golems as well. But as time goes on and people figure out where the weak spots in these decks are, they're gonna build aggro decks that try to take advantage of that. And then when the aggro decks start to become super prominent in the metagame, that's when you see another shift happen. And as those shifts continue to go back and forth and kind of go in this roundabout way, that's when the timing of when you play certain builds is really important. Is you're trying to nail a percentage of the metagame where your opponents are not playing on average the decks that are worse for you. Instead, they're playing the decks that are better for you because you've chosen the right deck build. And something like Aya Blackpaw has given these decks a lot of power in terms of how to fight the specific builds. Jade Golem very clearly is meant to fight against builds that are trying to just kind of kill all your minions over and over again and then win with one big endgame thing. Jade Golems are going to stomp that into the ground a lot. And when that's the case, that's when the way to tackle this is instead fight them on a strong early curve and go from there. So this is a really interesting spot that's going to change the way that a lot of the current builds are working, I think. And it gives me a very Arcane Giant-esque feel, where it's kind of the more you do, the more you get. Rock, paper, scissors, stone. Well, if you think about that way, Ayrton, I don't know how to pronounce that, Ayrton. If you think about how that metagame works, that kind of same thing works in almost every single game, where there's one strategy that trumps another one, that strategy trumps another one, and that strategy trumps another one. And I'm actually going to reference MMA here, because that's something I was really into when I was younger, and I didn't really understand what made fighters better than other ones. But sort of the way it went was that strength would beat technical fighters, because technical fighters couldn't overcome the strength of it. But then technical fighters would beat on sort of these scrappy freestyle fighters who did a lot of weird things and tried to get you in bad positions and then take advantage of your unfamiliarity with the situation, because they had such strong technical play. If you're trying to outmaneuver someone with wild, unpredictable moves and someone just has strong technical fighting, they're going to trump you, because you're going to get yourself in a lot of sticky situations where they have very characteristic fighting styles that are meant to tackle those situations. And then those big freestyle fighters are going to really prey on the strength guys, where they have done so much work in terms of just simply building their physical prowess that unpredictable natures is something that can get the better of them. And so that's sort of like a paper, rock, scissors thing that happens in a real physical sport. But the thing about it is finding the right balance of those and then trying to minimize your weaknesses while maximizing your strengths is something that exists in everything. So maybe some of these Jade Golem decks decide they want to dedicate a few more early game cards, and as a result don't always have the gas to get the job done in the very late game. You know, that's something they have to think about. And while it could just turn into a paper, rock, scissorsy thing, when you have a metagame that's so predictable that way, that's when combo decks can really come in and thrive as well. It's because Jade Golems are not going to thrive very well. It's combo, and combo decks are often going to be very good against control. So then finding the right combo decks that will fail versus the aggro decks. So you'll have this weak matchup a third of the time, and then you'll have two strong matchups 2/3 of the time. That's all part of the metagame stuff. So there's a lot of things to think about when you're building these. But Aya Blackpaw, I think, is fantastic. This card's just overall really cool looking and strong. Lotus Agents, this is kind of the discover mechanic for this one. Again, I'm not going to reiterate my thoughts too in depth. I covered them with the other prior two ones. Sometimes crossing over class cards is going to be good for you. Sometimes it's not going to matter very much. Is this going to take the place of Azure Drake? Probably not, but I would say this is the weaker of the three, because Jade Golem is probably the stronger of the three mechanics. So they had to give something up. Jade Spirit, this is the neutral Jade card for those three classes. Can be used in Shaman, in Druid, or in Rogue, and I expect this to be used. Already it's the 4-mana 2/3 that summons a Jade Golem, so if you get one Jade Golem prior to this, you're getting 4 or 5 worth of stats. Otherwise, it starts the catalyst to that Jade Golem aspect. So is a card like this too slow? I mean, 4-mana 2/3 is really weak when you think about it. In a lot of situations, Barnes is too weak to be played on the board, and Barnes has a much more manipulated effect, I think, than Jade Spirit does, because Jade Spirit's going to limit your deck building more. If Barnes isn't always good enough to play, maybe Jade Spirit's not always good enough to get played. But early on, I expect these archetypes to kind of be stomping metagames. So now we're getting into Druid class cards, which this is already is one of my favorite ones. 10 mana 7/7, Kuhn the Forgotten King. Choose one, gain 10 armor, or refresh your mana crystals. So once you've reached a 10 mana threshold, this card in effect becomes a free 7/7 if you want it to be. where you can innervate on turn 8 and play this and refund your 8 mana. If you're at 10 mana, you can play it, just simply refund your 10 mana and keep going. But sometimes you're not always going to want to commit that much stuff to the board or have a reason to commit that much stuff to the board. And if that's the case, you just get 10 armor. And 10 life's a lot. Like, picture versus some of the aggressive decks where you have played an Ancient War and that you didn't quite have enough. And so one of two ways had to go. Number one, you had to either put a lot of pressure on the board and hope your opponent didn't have the damage from hand to finish the game. Or number two, you needed something to stabilize, where if your opponent was using things more expendably than they would normally, the extra 10 armor you get from this can really solidify you in some great positions. So this is a card that I think does have a really nice spot in Druid decks, where once you get to the late game, you're kind of putting more of a clock on your opponent, where you have a very defined inflection point of your own game, which is 10 mana, I'm doing something very powerful. And that's really something that deck building is going to have to think about. In a Fatigue War, Druids are probably not going to have to worry about that, given one of the Jade Idol cards that's coming up, or the Jade Golem cards that's coming up. But overall, this is a card that I think offers a lot of flexibility, but at a really hefty cost, and that's 10 mana. And I think this is pretty spot on for where a 10 mana card should be. Something very powerful that changes the way that your deck can operate. Lunar Visions, 5 mana, Druid card, draw 2 cards, minions drawn cost 2 less. Well, if you know anything about Druid decks, you're usually not playing as many minions as you are spells. And this doesn't offer the flexibility that Nourish does, which is you can sometimes ramp with it. And so as a result of that, I would say that Lunar Visions is probably just going to take a back seat. It's an interesting card to think about if you have some more minion-heavy versions, but if you have more minion-heavy versions, aren't you kind of just ramping in general anyway? Like, I don't really see this card being a cut in pretty much any of the other builds. Like, again, Astral, what is this card called? I can't even remember the name of it. Astral something. I'm just like totally lost on what the name of this card is now. Let me just go look it up real quick. Astral Communion. You have a great Astral Communion option if that's something that's up your alley, but otherwise, pretty weak card overall. I wouldn't expect to see it played. Pilfered Power. 3 mana, gain an empty mana crystal for each friendly minion. This is probably one of the weirder cards for me to weigh, because in a way I could see this card being incredibly good, but I see this card being really bad at the same time. Something I'm really curious about is if this actually gives you excess mana or not. If this gives you excess mana, I could totally see putting it in some of the builds, but as it stands, really the only way I see using this card very strong is like turn 1 Living Roots into turn 2 Coin and then Pilfered Power and get 2 mana. Outside of that, this card's pretty situational, and situational cards tend to be very weak, but at the same time, situational cards where it's not too hard to activate, you know, you're going to be playing minions anyway, maybe it's really powerful in the right situation. I don't expect this to be played that much, but my gosh, this card's a little bit scary, and if this succeeds versus the right build, you're going to run away with some games. But when this fails against the wrong builds, you're in a lot of trouble. Like, against Zoo, this card's almost useless. But against Warriors, this card, like, incredibly good. Is this worth playing in some of those slots? I don't really know. But this is one, if you're going to play with it, certainly will take some tinkering with. And I think it's kind of nailing the head at where an Epic should be, which is more of like a build-around card that does something incredibly powerful in the right situation. Really curious about this. Curious how it works like Violet Teacher, too. Say you have, like, Violet Teacher, Coin, Innervate. Then you're getting 3 mana that turn. So you could go from 4 mana to 7 mana and then go into your 8 mana turn immediately. That's something to really think about, too. Again, I don't really see this card being like a defining card, but maybe it can actually create some archetypes or something else to do besides make a bunch of Violet Teacher tokens and then hope your opponent doesn't have swipe. You know, not really something big outside of that, I don't think. Oh, plus the discovered by other classes. It's a good catch, Kaisen. Yeah, that's definitely something to think about. Vermin Sensei, 5 mana, 4/5, give a friendly beast +2/+2. So the beast theme continues to be really pushed, and this card I don't think is going to get the job done. +2/+2 is definitely a lot better than Wild Walker, is it? Which is the 4 mana, 4/4 that gives a beast +0/+3. +2/+2 not only has more stats, but it's also power at the same time, so it can create some trade-up scenarios. But I don't really see Druid going the beast direction. And maybe it does if everyone's playing Jade Idol stuff, because you can kind of hit a scaling curve really early on before the Jade Golem decks do, and you can punish them that way. But overall, I see this card being pretty weak. Like, I think this is really hard to justify alongside Druid of the Claw. And if you're playing a beast build, you almost certainly are playing Druid of the Claw. So this is one I don't think is really on my radar to make a heavy impact. I think it's just to give you more options and isn't going to get the job done. Celestial Dreamer, 3 mana, 3/3. If a friendly minion has 5 or more attack, gain +2/+2. Okay, so this is something to really think about, where you now have some follow-up options on some of your innervate stuff. So say, for instance, you innervate out Savage Combatant. It's great to hero power on the next turn, but maybe now we're going to play Celestial Dreamer and get a 5/5 instead. That's something to really think about. Is Mukla ever playable alongside a card like this? 3/5/5 is a lot of stats. So this is something that I think you can look at in a lot of the Druid builds and see if the math on it is correct to try to hit timings like this. That being said, there's not like a ton of 5-power stuff that typically goes in Druid. So this is a card that, again, maybe changes the direction of the way you build some of the decks. But in the Beast decks, I would fully expect this to be played, where sometimes you'll be finding yourself coining a 3/2 on turn 1, playing Mark of Yashiraj on turn 2, and maybe playing this on turn 3. If that sequence ends up happening, you end up with 10 power on board for very low cost. So that's something really scary to think about. Is it require you to be a little lucky? Yeah, probably, but sometimes you're just going to get lucky enough. Those are definitely things that you need to think about when you're playing these styles of cards. Is how good are they going to be? How bad are they going to be? Is it worth playing? It's certainly something I expect worth tinkering with, but not necessarily going to make a cut. But overall, I like sort of these directions of cards too. The only problem I have with this is it's sort of like the rich get richer, so if your head, get more ahead. That is not necessarily my favorite theme, so kind of would tend to shy away from that one personally. So Jade Idol, this is kind of the card that honestly might scare me the most with the way that the Jade Golem decks will be built. Choose one for 1 mana. Summon a Jade Golem or shuffle 3 copies of this card in your deck. Now, shuffling 3 copies of this card in your deck is going to be really important versus anything that can get really grindy. But early on, this is just a 1 mana 1/1, and it gets the train rolling on your Jade Golems. Later in the game, when you can make 2 or 3 Jade Golems in a turn, this is very Arcane Giant-esque, where against aggro decks, you could potentially keep this on turn 1 just to get that rolling so you have Jade Golems that can actually fight for board. But later on, it is a lot of cheap Jade Golems that you could possibly get. And against the late game control decks, how do they fight against the potential of you being able to fill up your deck with larger and larger minions so that your draw density continues to be really high? Now, that costs you a lot. So when you're playing a control deck, this is something you're going to have to think about is, can I afford to play the slow, grindy game that I normally did, or do I have to actually play threats that'll get the job done? And when that's the case, I really don't see control decks having strong game versus Druid. That might be a matchup where if Jade Golem decks become popular, you're just going to have to rip that one because you're not going to win it. The second thing that Addy's mentioned here, which is what I was about to move into, is potential for fatigue. Druid can now pretty much outlast everything that's out there, but can you afford to give up that many draws? And does Druid have the removal necessary to get this done? And once again, if the Jade Golem thing becomes popular, do you have to fight them right back with Jade Golem stuff? And if you're watering the deck down with Jade Golem stuff, you're not controlling the board as well. So the fatigue thing, I think, is interesting in the right situation. But for the most part, this is about making sure that you have inevitability when the game halts to a grind, and forcing control players to actually maneuver their threats in a way that end games instead of just hitting the tank up button a lot. So I think it's a cool design, but man, I'm a little bit scared of this card. Get to the late game and play 2 Jade Golems and 2 Jade Idols in one turn? I don't know, man. You can draw a lot of cards with Nourish. This one seems a little bit scary to me. I think that if there's going to be one class that ends up being on the Jade Golem plane, it probably is Druid, and it's probably literally because of this card. The second one could be Rogue. I'll get to that a little bit later, but Rogue doesn't have quite the same power in terms of draw mechanics that Druid has. But wow, what a strong card. I expect this to be sort of a staple if it gets to that point. Jade Behemoth. Again, once this card on appearance looks a little bit weak, which is just 6 mana, 3/6 taunt, Battlecry summon a Jade Golem. But you have to think about how the game's panning out up to this point. So this is a card that's going to help you fight against some of the aggro plans where maybe you just need a little bit more life before you can kind of put the gas down and really go for it. But this is definitely a card that has a lot more punch to it in the right situation than normal. So I expect, once again, this to kind of be a big staple in some of the Druid Jade Golem decks where maybe as the decks become more control-oriented, you don't necessarily need something like this. It's kind of filling up the board for Brawl. It's just not necessarily a strong body in its own right. But if combo decks are there, this is kind of weak. But if control decks are present, this card is kind of like 50-50 on whether it's going to be super good or super bad. But if aggro decks are there, I think this fits very nicely into that, where you just need to go toe-to-toe with them for long enough to stabilize the board position. Would you put just one Jade Idol? Absolutely not, Devotee. I'd definitely play with two of them. I think that not only is it important to have the one-cost cards in your deck, but the flexibility it provides of just being able to kind of gas up your Jade Golems is going to be a really important factor. And because of that, it's something that I definitely expect to be seeing play a ton in the right situations. Jade Blossom. All the cards for Druid are really lining up for this. 3 mana, summon a Jade Golem, gain an empty mana crystal. So it's akin to Wild Growth. The difference is going to be that you can never draw a card with this one because it will not give you excess mana. I shouldn't say never because there's Auctioneer, but this card will not give you excess mana to draw a card. So this is a card I think that is going to be played a lot alongside Wild Growth. I think it's really difficult to replace Wild Growth in most Druid builds. But this card fits very nicely in that, where you're not always going to draw Wild Growth, and so when you don't, you have a reasonable supplement. And second is it's building right into the Jade Golem strategy. Johnny Coffin, whoop whoop, 3 months in a row, fight the Wellmets and the God blesses, and welcome Johnny Coffin back to the esports gaming team. And believe it or not, that brings our weekly sub count up for the week. We are now at 8 of 9 subscribers. We just need one more to hit our goal. Hashtag Kappa, hashtag sellout. Thank you very much, Johnny Coffin. But this card's fitting, again, very nicely into that ramp theme. Druid kind of has its identity right now all summed up in this one particular card, which is gain extra mana and ramp to big things. This is a double ramp effect if you're playing a Jade Golem deck. So the build around here is very easy and very self-descriptive. I'm curious if it's going to have the power to keep getting the job done, or if this is just going to be the initial build because it's so obvious. So that's something I'm really thinking about. But overall, this card sums up Druid in one card, and that's, again, something that's been hitting a lot in this set so far, and something I really enjoy, is that identities are kind of being more focused here. Terraformality, what's going on? Talbear, what's going on? Welcome, everybody, by the way, if you're new. The last couple of weeks for me, or I'd say like the last 6 weeks, have been really difficult for me just because I've been so busy to actually get streaming content done. But as time gets opened up, I will have a little bit more. Now, I do have some trouble. I do have some travel coming up towards the holidays, of course, as you might imagine a lot of people do. So it won't be around that time. But for the most part, I try to stream whenever I get the chance to. So if you guys want to throw me a follow here or on Twitter, Twitter is one of the best ways to either say anything to me, get my opinion on anything, or really follow what I'm doing. Twitter's just ThatsAdmirable, super easy to find. But I intend to keep this kind of content going, and with Mean Streets coming out on December 1st, I definitely intend to stream with some Mean Street stuff. So a lot of that should be coming up. If you want to get notifications for it, make sure you turn on notifications too. Otherwise, you're going to have to go to Twitch. You're going to have to look at everyone you're following and find the channel that way. If you have email notifications turned on, you'll just get one single email whenever I go live. Much easier to find that way. So if Jade Golems scale as they're summoned, does your opponent playing them as well impact yours and vice versa? I don't think it does, and to me that would make a little bit of a weird sense of timing of Jade Golems. I think it only affects your stuff, kind of like the way that Cthulhu would, as Kaisen literally just mentions. So that's something I don't think you're going to have to worry about, is kind of manipulating where your Jade Golems fit in timing with your opponent Jade Golems. That feels really cumbersome to me, and I'm glad that that's not the mechanic necessarily. Mark of the Lotus, 1 mana, give your minions +1/+1. In some situations, like off of like Raven Idol, I could definitely see this being played, but for the most part, this card's pretty darn weak, and rightfully so. I think Druid's gotten a lot of powerful cards lately. I think Druid's already in a strong spot in the metagame, and they're trying to sort of define where it is. And so your options right now are try to overwhelm your opponent and then kill them with some minion buffs, or number 2 is outscale them with Jade Golems. You don't really have that much of an in-between aspect. And I think one of the reasons why a lot of these cards are being designed so powerful is that they want to move Druid away from like this big combo-esque style where you just Malagos and kill your opponent. Is that going to be better than the Jade Golem stuff? I don't know. It might still be, but because you still have Arcane Giants, but maybe it's not. Maybe there's a combination of those two you end up playing. But either way, Druid is looking fantastic after this set. I think you have one of the strongest starter builds that's going to be out there. Curious to see if it stacks up against aggro, but a lot of tools to work with overall. This is, I think, by far one of the weaker Druid cards, when you don't consider the two that I just don't really think exist, which is the Pilfered Power and Lunar Visions. I think these cards are just kind of bad, but other than that, just a nice option off of Raven Idol mostly. Something else to think about when you're casting that card. So moving on to Hunter, my favorite named card of the set, Knuckles. And this guy packs some punch. He's giving you the 1/2. 5 mana 3/7 Beast. After this attacks a minion, it also hits the enemy hero. And that is super cool. This is a mechanic that is going to offer you board control options as well as damage pushes, that's exactly where Hunter wants to be from every single one of the cards you look at from Hunter. Every single one of them wants to be generating some sort of tempo and then chipping away at your opponent's life total. One of the reasons this is my favorite card favorite named card is because in German, the name translation is Dr. Fist. That's exactly what he's doing. He's giving you the knucks. You want a knuckle sandwich? He's here to give it to you. This card I think is just really cool. It's not really super inspiring, but this really gets the job done. It's just hitting you and hitting you hard. This is a fantastic card that I think fills a role in Hunter right now, which is, what the heck do I do at turn 5? Most of the time turn 5 for Hunter is like play a 3-cost card and then hero power. Now you have a real thing to drop that's really troublesome for your opponent, but maybe with some costs. Priest is getting some really nice cards in this set as well, and maybe you drop Knuckles and you run straight into Shadow Word Pain. That's something you're going to have to think about in some of these situations, but a very nice card, I think, against pretty much every variety of deck that you can really think about. So overall, really good. Will it be like Cthulhu and Fallout Favorites? People know how to play against it. That's kind of what I'm thinking, Kilogram Hours. I actually mentioned that right at the beginning when I was talking about Jade Golem stuff, is that the cards tend to be really powerful. I'll kind of skip over some cards as I'm going through this. Piranha Launcher, not really anything to think about. 5-mana, 2/4 weapon. Welcome to Harrison Jones Town if this card ever gets popular. Playing the Jade Golem strategy is going to be so easy when you first start because the cards kind of build themselves, honestly. Or the decks build themselves, rather. But as people start to figure out where the weaknesses of those cards are, that's when you're able to really build aggro decks that are meant to focus on those weak spots. And so that's a great spot to start taking advantage of Jade Golem decks if and when they become popular. Towbear, just subscribe with Twitch Prime. Fightless Moments and Fightless God Blesses. Welcome, Towbear, back to the esports gaming team. And believe it or not, that brings our weekly sub count up for the week. We are now at 9 of 10 subscribers. We just need one more to hit our goal. Hashtag Kappa, hashtag sell out. Does it have to survive the minion attack to do damage to the hero? That's a good question. So I guess we would refer to the text on that one and use our intuition there. So after this minion attacks, it also attacks the enemy hero. I would venture to say this has to survive because it says the word after. It's kind of like a Wild Pyromancer where you cast a whirlwind spell. If it dies during the whirlwind, there is no after. It's just dead. So I would assume this has to survive the attack in order to deal the damage. Migo board, Migo face, screw it, Migo both. That says it all right there. That card is great. 3-mana 2/2 Death Rattle. Summon a number of 1/1 rats equal to this minion's attack. Kind of a cool card, where if you can end up buffing this one up in your hand, you might get some tremendous effect out of it. But honestly, not really that bad at a 3-mana 2/2. It's a lot like Infested Wolf, where this builds into the idea that you can land a Houndmaster more consistently. Now, the problem with this card is that it's competing with Eagle Hornbow and Animal Companion, which are two very strong cards. And if you're playing the secret builds, which the secret builds are some of the more popular ones right now, due to how strong Druid is, you're going to want to be able to play Cat Trick alongside Cloaked Huntress. You're going to want to be able to manipulate Freezing Trap as you see fit when you have Cloaked Huntress out. So this is potentially competing against Cloaked Huntress, Eagle Hornbow, and Animal Companion. And that's a lot of stuff to compete with. So if you're playing a much more beast-centric build, I could see this fitting in. But if you're playing secrets at all, I don't really see this card making the cut. But that's sort of a good thing. You have strong 3-drop options, but I'm really curious where you fight against Eagle Hornbow and Animal Companion, because my gosh, those are the bread and butter cards. Those are two tough ones to beat, but it does offer you some nice options if you need to be more board-centric. I think it's something that's really cool. Dispatched Kodo. This is actually one of my favorite cards in the whole set. 4-mana 2/4 Battlecry, deal damage equal to this minion's attack. So something that's really interesting to note is prior when we've seen things like this, oftentimes they kind of reference random. And I'm thinking like Arcane Missiles or Avenging Wrath, for instance. Now this doesn't shoot out missiles, it just deals all the damage at one time. So in order for this card to be unlocked its full potential, you do need to have some buffs in the hand, which maybe this is the class where that's going to end up happening. But as a 4-mana 2/4 that just can hit something, this is a really nice option for Hunter, I'd say. Hunter right now is very limited at the 4-drop slot, where it's either you're playing Infested Wolf and you're kind of just relying on the singular power of that card to get the job done, or you're playing a Houndmaster build and you need to have board in order to really make something happen. But Dispatched Kodo is really kind of a throwback to what Old Keeper of the Grove was. Now, Old Keeper of the Grove gave you the option to silence, but you didn't really silence it with it that much. You did quite a bit, but for the most part, that card dealt 2 damage to something, and that is something to really think about. Plus, this is a beast, so that's another synergy aspect your opponent has to think about when you're playing a card like this. So I can see this really providing some power, where Hunter will typically struggle with decks like Zoo if they don't check him early on. This gives you a powerful option on turn 4 where maybe you can check it a little bit easier. So that's something really cool to think about. Maybe we're not going to have to rely so much on Unleash the Hounds to could be a come from behind mechanic, and you can fight on a more one-for-one basis to outscale them. This is a really cool card, and I love it. I'm hoping this card ends up making the cut because I'd like to see the Hunter builds focus a little bit more on a tempo aspect than just on a strictly, purely, this is my super strong card, can you deal with it aspect. I find that play a little bit boring personally, but cards like this really open my mind to Hunter. I don't play a lot of Hunter anymore, and this card maybe opens that a little bit. It was really good with Innervate, but what isn't good with Innervate, to be honest with you? I guess, I don't know, like another Innervate and nothing else afterwards. Maybe that's not so good with Innervate, but pretty much everything's good with Innervate. Oh, it works with Direwolf Alpha too, so that's something really cool to note, is that maybe you can play that. There are also some other Hunter cards that are really fitting into this same theme as well. So, something to keep on the lookout for. And this is definitely one of them. 2 mana, 3/2, Battle Cry, give a random beast in your hand +1/+1. Something I think that's really cool about this is it says random beast. So you're never using Trogg Beast Rager and buffing your other Trogg Beast Rager. If you have Trogg Beast Rager, Animal Companion, and Dispatched Kodo, you're buffing the Dispatched Kodo at that point. That's really cool that it's not hitting any utility cards you're using outside of it. So this is one of the cards I think that can, once again, begin to change the way that you build a Hunter deck. You're not necessarily looking for going turn 1 snowball the game, and instead you're looking for really key turns to attack what your opponents are doing. And if that's the case, that's where Hunter can maybe find its spot, where, say you're playing against Shamans and you need to be able to pick off Feral Spirits profitably. Trogg Beast Rager into Dispatched Kodo can really dismantle that card's tempo and its value in a 1-2 punch. So that's something that's really cool to think about, is that maybe Hunter will be feeling more of a metagame call than it will be as just like a super powerful, oppressive, dominate your opponent style of thing. I don't really expect it to be that super powerful early on, but as time goes on and decks get more defined, Hunter has a lot of tools to work with to fight against some of the more defined builds you'll see, I think. Strength of these buff decks that it forces the enemy to use hard removal, which means your big minions like Highmane or Tyrion are extremely hard to deal with effectively. That's definitely something else to consider alongside of it. But some of the buff mechanics, if you think about those classes, they traditionally have given control decks a tough time anyway. And I think there's something to be said about the idea that long grindy games I think are bad, but longer games in general I think would be good. So being able to fight against what Shaman can do with, say, like turn 7 Thunderbuff Valiant Hero Power with other options is a good thing. Being able to keep that at bay and make sure they don't have those super strong turns will slow the game down, give it diversity, and at the same time keep the games from getting too long. Because I love playing 30-minute games myself, but that's because I'm a purist who's been playing cards for 21 years. People who've been playing cards for 5 years don't necessarily like 30-minute games. So I think I like where this direction's headed. But that's a good point you make too as well, which is big things do require removal from your opponent. And when that's the case, it opens up the doorway for larger, more higher priority minions. That's something definitely to think about. Hidden Cache. 2 mana secret. After your opponent plays a minion, give a random minion in your hand +2/+2. This card seems a little bit too situational, I think, to be justifying a card in Hunter, where a lot of Hunter cards are already fairly situational. Adding more to that by having this, maybe not the best thing in the world. Against kind of control, which is what Kilogram Hours mentioned just a moment ago, that's where the buffs, I think, make the highest impact. And against those decks, they're not always playing minions. They're sometimes answering yours. So Hidden Cache, I don't think makes the cut. I think this is a pretty poor Hunter card, and it's meant to give you more an illustration that this is a very big Hunter thing, not necessarily of play Hidden Cache. It's a really good card. It's meant to teach you a lot, I think, about the game and how tempo works more than anything else. Shaky Zip Gunner. 3 mana, 3/3, Death Rattle, give a random minion in your hand +2/+2. This card's going to be really tough to compete, again, with Eaglehorn Bow or Animal Companion, where Eaglehorn Bow offers damage and flexibility. Animal Companion offers you a tremendous amount of stats for a very low cost. It's tough to fit this in over the Rat. 3 mana, 2/2, make 2 1/1s when it dies. That is incredibly difficult to do. So I'm not sure this necessarily makes the cut against those cards. This just seems like it's a little bit too weak to get that done, but Hunter is clearly one of the bigger buff your hand mechanics. One of the way bigger ones. Shocks doesn't give +3/+3. Actually, I'm a 2 a little bit. Maybe +3/+3 was a little bit much. I'm curious to see what the balance was. That being said, maybe it's a little bit more powerful than I think it is. Something that's interesting to note is, did Hunter have options to slow the game down a little bit too much in their favor and then rely on the inevitability because they have such a strong set of late game cards. You know, that's something you don't really want, is Hunter being able to always get to Call of the Wild very effectively. So maybe +2/+2, maybe +2/+3 was just enough to make that happen. It only exists for bluffing. That's a good point, Kaizen. It definitely could exist for bluffing. I don't think it's too strong. Probably the most adorable card in the set, Alley Cat. 1 mana, 1/1, Battlecry, summon a 1/1 cat. Wow! What a good card. What a good card. Oh my gosh. Like, this is like the Hunter dream in a lot of situations, is to be able to have a card that not only doesn't die very easily, but also gets a lot of pressure rolling on your opponent. My goodness. I mean, this is like living roots for Hunter. That's disgusting good. Like, you don't have the option of being able to deal the 2 damage, but you're getting 2 beasts. Like, this activates Kill Command. This is like a great turn 1 drop. This is now a 1 drop you can use alongside Fiery Bat. Like, your options before have been very poor, but this card is really getting the job done. My gosh, like that, what a strong card. Holy moly. Yeah, I would pretty much expect this to be a staple that's out there. Definitely so. If you want to permit, also, you can ask one of the mods for it. Mods, feel free to permit people if they ask for anything like that. Not too stringent or whatever it's going to be about that. I'm not, just let people post stuff. If they post something stupid, just go ahead and ban it. I'm not worried much about it. But overall, man, Alley Cat's good. Whew. Hunter needed some early game too, but it's really scary to give Hunter super strong early game, because if they snowball it, you're in trouble. You're in a lot of trouble. Woo! Whew! 10 out of 10. What a great card. Cat is a feline, not a beast. Is the cat token also? I'd imagine the cat's a beast. Actually, is there a cat in the game that's not a beast right now? Or a feline, rather? Is there a feline in the game that's not a beast? I don't think there is. I don't think there is. Smuggler's Crate. Give a random beast in your hand +2/+2. It's a pretty interesting card. I think I could definitely see this getting played in a lot of spots, but man, it's so hard for this card to really compete against Fiery Bat or Alley Cat. You know, if you're building something that's meant to kind of stack on one thing a little bit more, maybe, but if Animal Companion is the beast that you have in your hand, this card is not really very good. And once again, you have to think about that. When you, like, say you're playing the Dirty Rat build, where you have found a build that doesn't necessarily rely on an Eagle Horn Bow and Animal Companion to be sort of the main focuses of your Hunter build, can definitely see this buffing the rat and being a big deal. Like, then suddenly you have a 3 mana 4/4 that summons 4 1/1s when you die. It's definitely something to think about. Lock and load synergy. Ah, that's something I didn't think about, Fimaru. That's a really good call. This card is high risk, high reward. If you draw it early on and you land it, you are going to be in good shape. But once you kind of get in the top deck war, not a very strong card. But that's something that Hunter has never really thrived in anyways, the top deck war. So maybe this is a card you do play to kind of exacerbate that high risk, high reward feel. Wow, that is tough. That's a really tough one to call. This card seems like it's really strong, though. Something else to really think about is that, say you are playing Alley Cat and you are playing Fiery Bat, sometimes you just don't want to play them on turn 1. Like, think about against like Mage or Druid, for instance. Those cards on turn 1 are a little bit weaker, or against Rogue, for instance. Maybe you can take a turn to Smuggler's Crate and then follow up with those cards later on, and suddenly they're real threats your opponent may have to dedicate actual resources to other than life. That's something to really think about. This card's really bad versus Warrior. It's really good versus Mage, Druid, and Rogue, though. How good is it versus Shaman, too? That's something else to think about. Against Shaman, you're going to have to compete against Totem Golems. So maybe buffing something and then dropping it a little bit later on is good in those situations. I don't know. I'm a little bit torn on this card. I'm not quite as convinced. When I first saw this card, I thought it was just dreadful. But now that I'm thinking about it, it seems all right. I could totally see playing a card like this and just relying purely on that high risk, high reward style strategy, where when you get rewarded, you're gonna win the game a lot, and when you're not, would you have won that game anyway? Because if Hunter gets into those weird grindy battles, it loses a lot of those. Could definitely see that being the case. So I'm gonna take a quick break right here to use the bathroom and grab some water, but I'm gonna come back with the rest of the cards. So Mage is the next one moving up, and I'll go ahead and bring up the cards so you guys can let your thoughts boil on this one a little bit. Ink Master Salia is really cool. And I want to talk about this card a little bit because my initial impression was this card was super strong, but there's a card I'm thinking about that didn't end up being super strong, but maybe there's enough in here to change it. So you guys hang tight with me for just a few moments. I'll be right back. Boom, we are back. Thank you for sticking with me. 100 bonus beards for everyone. Thank you guys for showing up if you're brand new around here. Beards for everyone. It's like Disney dollars. It's like real money, only funner. Yeah, if you're looking for a link to all the cards Sazbot, you can use the command MSOG in chat, and it'll link you up to all the cards that are there. Oops. So Hearthstone apparently closed, so I was going to do something with that real quick. So I'm using the Hearthstone one to take a look at every single thing, so definitely something to look at. Swiftshirt, just subscribe with Twitch Prime 10 months in a row. Happy Diamond Anniversary. Swiftshirt, thank you very much for the love. Fireless Wellmets and Fireless God Blesses. Mob Goblin just subscribed as well. Whoop whoop! Fireless Wellmets and Fireless God Blesses. Welcome these two back to the esports gaming team with Mob. I don't even remember what your previous one was. It was a long time, though. Swiftshirt, 10 months, and Mob, how many months is that now, Mob? That is a lot, but either way, it brings our weekly sub count up for the week. We are now at 11 of 12 subscribers. We just need one more to hit our goal. Hashtag sell out. Let me take this light back on since it's sun's getting a little bit cloudy. Which cards have you reviewed so far? So if you take a look at the Hearthstone link that's in chat, Trend Nation, I've gotten through, I just finished the Hunter cards. So everything up to Mage cards has been done so far, but this right now is where we're going to start talking on this. Is there a release date for Mean Streets of Gadgetzan? Yeah, I dropped a hurt. It's December 1st. December 1st. So in 3 days, we're getting this set. And I am stoked about it. I'm kind of giving my first thoughts on some of this stuff and maybe some directions that you want to take your deck builds when the new set comes out. But overall, there's a lot to do with this set. And I think it's definitely some math that can be worked around and you can figure out where the stronger builds are. But to start, you know, if you're looking for stuff about that, you drop me a follow here. I'm definitely streaming when it happens, and we're gonna work to really get some stuff done. And make sure that if you're gonna follow, you turn on the notification. If you don't turn on notifications, you're gonna have to go through everyone you follow to see when I'm live about this. But if it's notification, you just get one single email whenever I go live. Boom. You know it right there. And then another super good way to stay up to date with the schedule is just going to be through Twitter. I do a lot of stuff with games. Most of it is with Hearthstone, but anytime you're looking for updates on that or opinions on anything, Twitter's going to be the best way to find that. And if you're looking to kind of get some questions out there or you have opinions on stuff and you want to have conversations, I'm pretty active on Twitter as well. So just feel free to follow me on there. It's ThatsAdmirable, super easy to find. And just hit me up anytime you want. I'm more than willing to offer my 2 cents on just about anything that's out there. Paul Clark, yeah, I've lost 80 pounds since May, so it's been honestly it hasn't even been that difficult. I've just changed my diet mostly, but yeah, I've lost a ton of weight. Thanks for noticing. 3 days too soon, I'm broke. Hey, well, Christmas is right around the corner, and if you hang tight around my stream, maybe I'll have a little bit of bonuses to get for you guys. Oh, that reminds me. For those of you who are here right now, I've been talking about the microphone giveaway. I'm sorry that I'm interrupting the review with this, but I've been talking about the microphone giveaway, and I wanted to get into this. Before that happens, Man Without a Plan. I haven't played Hearthstone since TGT, but Admirable card reviews are fun. Man Without a Plan, you're stepping right back into the right spot. I think the old metagame is pretty much solved. Shaman is far and away the best deck, and it's hard to take advantage of. But we're seeing a big shakeup with Mean Streets of Gadgetzan. So if you're looking to start the pre-order, it's $50 for 50 packs. You're not getting a much better deal than that, and it's perfect time to start. The last month, I haven't been able to play too much Hearthstone because I've been so busy with my schedule. I haven't been able to play as much as I want to, and I normally do. But it's definitely a time that I'm really excited about is right now. And I didn't get to try any heroic Brawl Swift shirt. I was so busy during those weeks, and I was so exhausted when I got back. I was on the road for 27 out of 31 days during like the October-November period. And I just got back, and I took like a mini vacation down to Monterey with my girlfriend, and we just relaxed, and we enjoyed the ocean and had great seafood, and I've gotten all my sleep caught back up. I don't feel like I have any sleep debt anymore, and I feel fantastic. And it's so good to be home, because one of the things that I love most about what I do is that I just get to hang out with you guys and talk about video games. I saw Day9 tweet a couple months ago, I think it was. He said, I think explaining things is what I enjoy more than just about anything else in the world. And I was like, wow, that's like literally me. I just like explaining stuff. It doesn't even really matter what topic it is. You guys could ask me about any topic that I'm interested in, and I could tell you about it. It's great. Seafood, yeah, Paul Clark. Monterey is right on the bay, and they have oysters from 8 miles down the coast. They have sustainably caught fish that they serve there, and they have an incredibly large aquarium. That's awesome. It's great down there. Dark 62,410. Once again, I am here to darken the mood. What's up, man? It's awesome to hear. Yeah, thank you guys very much. I really appreciate it. Great job on Hearthstone Championship Tour, by the way. Thank you very much. That was wonderful to work with, and I think there was some awesome stuff. Anyways, let's get right back into the reviews now. I've talked enough about nonsense stuff. Microphone giveaway. I didn't talk about that. So for the microphone giveaway, I've tried to think of a lot of different ways to do this, and the best way to do it, I think, is to give it to the person who I feel honestly needs it and deserves it the most. So the way I'm going to be doing that is I'll tweet some details with some rules and stuff later, but basically I'm going to want to have people write me a 300 or less word essay and email it to me. And I'm just going to read all the submissions, and I'm going to pick the story I thought was best and just give it to that person. I don't have any reason to resell this thing. In terms of finances, I'm in a reasonable spot where I can pay my bills. And it's something that I think someone can use, like if they want to make YouTube content or they just want to have a better experience gaming. There's no reason for me to try to profit off of this thing or anything else. I'm honestly just interested a lot of times in people who are sharing the same passion I do, which is just video games, and specifically Hearthstone. And so I'm going to give it away to an essay writer who wrote it, and it's going to be a short story about why you deserve the microphone and what you're going to be. Subs only? Nope, it's just going to be whoever. It probably is going to be US only, because I can't guarantee shipping to international stuff because of customs and the cost on that. And like I've done international shipping a lot when I dealt with buying and selling tradable stuff, and it's a pain to do international shipping. Number one, it's incredibly expensive, and then number two, sometimes it takes like 6 to 8 months to get there, and then like a very large percentage of the time in comparison to shipping domestically, it just gets sent back. And people internationally are going to pay taxes and customs on it and stuff. And I know it sucks, but it's what it boils down to. I really wish it wasn't the case, because I know there's a lot of European, Canadian viewers. There's some people that are in the Aussie area, and I really wish that it was just that way. You know what I'm interested in? Your card reviews. Thank you, Raffinius. Kind of going on. I mean, it's been over a month since I've streamed, so I am catching up with some stuff as well. But I do definitely want to give that away, and I'll have some details about that on Twitter later on, probably the next 2 days or so. So I'm glad that I was reminded of that. Anyways, on to mage cards now. Ink Master Solia, 7 mana, 5/5. If your deck has no duplicates in it, the next spell you cast this turn costs 0. So it's the perfect card to cast right before you coin. But something that I really thought about this card at first was like, wow, this is incredibly powerful. And then I thought about it, and I went, well, I mean, we did have Cho'Gall, and Cho'Gall didn't do anything. And Cho'Gall didn't even require you to not have duplicates in your deck. But something else to really think about was, what was Warlock really dominated by? And the first one was Reno decks. And Reno decks needed to have sort of a redundancy of minions in order to create a very powerful effect of having a more consistent deck base, so you could have the major swing that Reno Jackson provides. With Inkmaster Solia, though, you have some mage cards that are incredibly powerful. And a couple of things that come to mind is, number one, you have a big burst damage spell, which you don't really have in Warlock. You have Pyroblast. Number two, you have board recovery spells, tempo and card advantage in the form of Firelance Portal and Flamestrike. So those are two other big ones you get from there. Number three, we have Kazakus entering the format, which if you're going to play a deck with no duplicates in it, Kazakus usually is going to fit in there. It's a reasonably statted body that can give you some powerful effects. Combining that with Inkmaster Solia can be a really big deal. But something to think about is that you don't have any duplicates in your deck. And traditionally, Mage has been one of the decks that really wants to have a lot of duplicates in it. Namely with Fireball and Frostbolt. When you can't play two copies of those cards, what dynamic does Mage take on when that's happening? Can you get enough redundancy from Mage in order to justify an effect like this? And so I went back and forth on this for a long time, where I was like, oh, this card's insane. And then I was like, well, Cho'Gall really sucked, and I thought that card was going to be good. You just didn't have the tools around it to really get the job done. And I think it was more limited by the tools than that card design, honestly. Because I think Cho'Gall, if Warlocks had really big, powerful endgame spells they could play, it'd be a really good card. But Inkmaster Solia is trading that life cost for the deck building cost. And so this is something I think can really fit in some of the builds. And I'm curious to see if this is enough to get the job done. Because 7 mana 5/5s, it's okay, but really the power of this card is either accelerating to a stronger card that you don't necessarily have access to, or number two is being able to get a 5/5 body alongside those cards. And so when you think about that, Firelance Portal is now giving you two basically 5-cost bodies, where Flamestrike is giving you one of the 5-cost bodies. And part of the problem with Flamestrike is that oftentimes if you aren't crushing your opponent's card advantage in card advantage afterwards, or you're not getting board development or already have board development, Flamestrike's not nearly as good. This now can open up that option to have the Flamestrike, get your board development, and get card advantage. And that is a very powerful thing to think about in one card. I can definitely see this being played. I can definitely see it getting played. Now, I'm curious if it's going to get played. That's something to really think about. But this next card coming up is something that maybe opens it up a little bit. A lot of people are saying this next card's really bad. I don't necessarily agree with them. Greater Arcane Missiles. 7 mana. Shoot 3 missiles at random enemies that deal 3 damage each. And some people are like, oh, this card's trash. We have Arcane Missiles. It's 1 mana for 3 damage. Why would I play this one? Well, the reason you'd play this one is because there's a lot of stuff on one card. And if you think about that, historically, a lot of stuff on one card is pretty good. Picture this against like Control Warrior, for instance. Pyroblast is 10 mana to deal 10 damage. But against a control player, this is oftentimes going to be 7 mana deal 9 damage. And then if you have 1 point of spell damage out, this is 7 mana deal 12 damage. And then if you have 2 points of spell damage out, this is 7 mana deal 15 damage. It's a lot of damage for one card. And it's a lot of damage. And that being said, it's not even that bad versus some of the decks that are going to play minions. Sometimes they're going to have two minions out, and this is an option to fight against that. So the thing about this is, depending on how the metagame is developing, this gives you an option to fit in with where like normally you'd have a Flamestrike slot. Maybe the Flamestrike's not as good versus the minions people are playing right now, but you need a flexible option versus those decks, and you need something that can pack some damage versus a control deck. Yeah, suddenly you're getting a lot of damage out of this card, potentially. That's a lot of damage. What if you have 3 damage? Then it's dealing 18 damage. But my gosh, you get more damage from the missile than you do number of missiles. So this shoots 3 missiles. No matter what, this is shooting 3 missiles. And how much damage each missile deals is where it's going to be magnified. So if you manage to land Malagos with this, and your opponent doesn't have a minion out, this is dealing 24 damage. Jabroni, 6 months in a row. Awesome meeting you at BlizzCon. Nijak being paveled to food trucks. Hope you had much fun as we did. Cheers. Jabroni, yes, it was a blast, man, and I'm glad that you were there for it. Fight was Womets and Fight was God Blesses. Welcome Jabroni back to the esports gaming team with half a year of love. And believe it or not, that brings our weekly sub count up to 12 of 13 subscribers. We just need one more to hit our goal. Hashtag Kappa, hashtag sellout. Yeah, 3. You're getting 3 missiles, and then each missile is going to deal 3 damage as the base. So if you have 1 point of spell damage, or 4 damage as the base. Whoa! Tess, 9 months in a row. Huge day. Admiral streams again. Great to see you. Cast at BlizzCon. Thank you very much, Tess. And Fightless Moments and Fightless God Blesses. Welcome, Tess, back to the esports gaming team. And believe it or not, that brings our weekly sub count up for the week. We are now at 13 of 14 subscribers. We just need one more to hit our goal. Hashtag Kappa, hashtag sell out. But yeah, I don't think this card's that bad. Now, it's not a staple. Don't go going crazy and be like, Admiral said this card's, it's gonna deal 45 damage! Ah, he was wrong. I'm gonna go post on Reddit about what an idiot he is. Admirable's stupid. All he does is cast. That's why he doesn't play anymore. It's because he's bad and he doesn't know how the cards work. It's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that this card can pack a punch in the right situation. It can really hit hard. 7 mana for 9 damage is not a joke against a control deck. I'm curious how much control decks are really going to thrive in a metagame like this. We just have a lot of tools that fight against them really strong. So, I don't really know. It seems like a good card to me. I'll tell you what, if you play Inkmaster right into that, it's going to be pretty good. Whoop whoop! Dwayna just subscribed. Fightless Moments and Fightless God Blesses. Welcome, Dwayna, to the eSports gaming team. And believe it or not, that brings our weekly sub count up for the week. We are now at 14 of 15 subscribers. We just need one more to hit our goal. Hashtag Kappa, hashtag solid. Thank you very much, Dwayna. How does Magic buff, power buff this? So, 3 missiles. You're shooting 3 missiles no matter what, period, 3 missiles. Each spell damage is going to buff each missile. So if you have 1 point of spell damage out, it's going to shoot 3 missiles to deal 4 damage. If you have 2, it's going to shoot 3 missiles to deal 5 damage, etc. But yeah, this card seems really good to me. I don't know about y'all, but I can totally see this being played in a lot of situations. The problem is it's competing against Firelance Portal, it's competing against Flamestrike. So when I see this card mostly being used is going to be in some of the Reno builds that want an extra 7 mana card. It's going to be in some of the builds that want to run Flamestrike. Flamestrike's not quite as good right now because of what your opponents are doing, because there's enough control to make it bad, and so as a result, you want the option to sometimes deal 9 damage. I think the card's fairly strong overall. Manic Soulcaster. 3 mana, 3/4, Battlecry. Choose a friendly minion, shuffle a copy into your deck. Something that's really cool, I think, to think about with this card is that we're seeing some classes being able to really extend over the 30-card limit. And Mage already had that theme with Forgotten Torch, and now it's kind of really sitting in that same tone, which is like, it's almost like resetting a cooldown. Where if you play a Manic Soulcaster, you get to put whatever back in your deck. If you play another Manic Soulcaster and you hit this one, you get another Manic Soulcaster back in your deck. So in certain situations, can you stack those 3/4s to just keep going over and over again? I don't really know, but that's something to definitely think about, is that if you're trying to play a late grindy situation, maybe this card gives you enough to out-sustain the fatigue damage you might take otherwise. So that's something that's really cool. Ice Saint. Isn't magic missiles 1 spell power equals +1 missile? Not like the missile does more damage. It is that way for arcane missiles. Saint, but for that one, it specifically says it shoots 3 missiles, and then each missile deals 3 damage. So each missile is where the spell damage is going to be amplified. Could see play in Reno Mage decks and get one of the Highlander dependent cards. Definitely, I think that's definitely a really important thing too, is that when you're playing a deck that doesn't have duplicates in it, when you've drawn one and you put one into your deck, it's not a duplicate anymore, because you've already drawn one from your deck. So now you have one in your deck and you have one in your hand or in play, or I guess it's in play at that point. But you kind of get where I'm going with that. Shuffle another Kazakus. Woo! Woo! Multiple Kazakus. How did that happen? Great googly moogly. One of the scarier cards in the set to me. 6 mana, 5/5. Cabal Crystal Runner. Costs 2 less for each secret you've played this game. Now, there's something to think about here, is that secrets already cost 3 mana, so the investment you're getting this is more of like a slight refund than it is anything else. But there are some opportunities for you to accelerate to this situation, which I actually will skip down to this one because it's so important and such a vital thing to talk about for this particular strategy, which is the Cabal Lackey. 1 mana, 2/1. The next secret you play this turn costs 0. So if you play this on turn 1, you could just throw a Mirror Entity out there if you wanted to. You could throw a Counterspell, you could throw an Ice Block, whatever it's going to be. So let's say, for instance, you had turn 1 Cabal Lackey and you play a secret. On turn 2, you Frostbolt something. On turn 3, say you just play another secret, or maybe you have Kirin Tor Mage into a secret. Suddenly, this is a 2 mana 5/5. And that is really scary to think about. If you think about Mage in general, one of the things it thrives on is generating tempo at some point. like a really big tempo at some point. And this card can definitely provide that ability where if you're playing a secret heavy build, you literally can get multiple Cabal Crystal Runners in the same turn if you have them. Now, my question that I had initially was, will this card cost less if it's not in your hand? And so this is where I wanted to reference something very specific. Whoop, whoop! Gadgetzan, just subscribe. Was able to catch a couple of your casting events. Great work as always. Keep up the good work. Gadgetzan, 2 months in a row with Twitch Prime. Thank you very much. Fight was moments and fight was God blesses. Welcome Gadgetzan back to the esports gaming team. Believe it or not, that brings our weekly sub count up to 15 to 16 subscribers. We just need one more to hit our goal. Hashtag Kappa, hashtag sellout. So I'm gonna have to load up Hearthstone real quick here to show you an example of how this is going to work, because this to me was, I thought this was an inconsistent wording, and then what I realized is that this is not an inconsistent wording, it's just the way the wording works. It's kind of confusing because it's incredibly similar. So I guess maybe ambiguous is the right word for that. Whoop, I don't want to have that up there. How do I show that off? So let me load up Hearthstone real quick here, which you heard the guy talking about it. So we saw the last card, which again I'll bring it up for you real quick, or I'll just read it to you. Cost 2 less for each secret that you've played this game. Okay, that is consistent with Thing from Below. Thing from Below costs 1 less for each totem summon you summon this game. And now the other card I'm thinking about is Knight of the Wild. Whenever you summon a beast, reduce the cost of this card by 1. So the wording here is that Knight of the Wild is activating when you summon a beast. It's whenever you summon a beast, reduce the cost of this card by 1. So it's really ambiguous because it kind of means the same thing, but that's the difference between these two cards. So Cabal Crystal Runner will get the discount even if the card's not in your hand. If the card is in your deck, it will get a discount. And that is a huge distinction because this card was literally unplayable because you needed to have it in your hand when you were playing Beast. That makes it bad. But in the other situation, you get to just discount it, and if you draw it, so be it. That's a big deal. Mad Scientist will not reduce the cost. Let's read Mad Scientist real quick. What the heck? Oh, I'm in Standard is why. Well, how do I swap over? There we go. Put a secret from your battlefield, from your deck onto the battlefield is what Mad Scientist says. So let me pull this down for you again real quick. Put a secret from your deck onto the battlefield. Or into the battlefield. So I don't think you're actually playing it, so I don't think that counts. So it doesn't count towards Yogg. So I'm guessing you're not actually playing the secret, so that probably doesn't count. But either way, this card is really cool because of that. And I think that opens up the potential for secret decks, where if this had to be in your hand, not a chance. But because it can be in your deck, I think it's a really big deal. To me, that's what's making the card good, is the fact that it gets the discount while it's not in your hand. That's a huge distinction. Volcanic Potion, 3 mana, Mage Spell, deal 2 damage to all minions. Super cool. I think something that the game has really been missing is strong AoE. And while you might be thinking like, oh, of course, Mage gets more AoE. It's going to ruin Arena. First of all, we don't review Arena cards here. Okay, that's not even a subject I really care about. Number 2 is that we're just getting strong AoE cards. You know, something that Mage has struggled with for a long time is the ability to handle widespread pressure until the later stages of the game. Now, instead, you just have a way to outright kill that. Like, Zoo is like one of the hardest matchups for Mage. And it's still going to be hard. I mean, this card is not going to take care of Darkshire Councilman or Imp King Boss, but what it will take care of is a double Flame Imp starter. What it will take care of is Flame Imp, Dark Peddler, Knife Juggler, and then a small minion. It's something to really think about. I like AoE cards. I think more AoE needs to exist. I think it gives you a lot of options to fight against aggro builds. And the aggro builds can get more clever by playing weaker cards that have more sustained pressure than they do immediate pressure. That's something else to think about to fight against AoE. So those are going to be metagame calls. And frankly, I think metagame calls are part of what gives players their edge, is when they make the right metagame call, they're in a favorable position. When they don't, they're at a disposition. I don't necessarily feel like the edge should just be in the fact that you chose a very strong deck that's stronger than your opponents. Otherwise, you end up with hashtag midrange shaman. You clear all except Jade Golems. You know, I mean, you can't win them all, right? Potion of Polymorph. 3 mana secret for Mage. After your opponent plays a minion, transform it into a 1/1 sheep. So, wow. There's some distinctions I'm going to make here that this is the way I think these cards are going to work, based on my intuition and paying closer attention to card text. If you have Mirror Entity and Potion of Polymorph, Here's what I think's happening. Regardless of the order they're played, I think you're going to get the initial minion, and then Potion of Polymorph turns it into a 1/1 sheep. And I'll bring up the reason why here. I think that that's the case. So if you... Oh, wait, no. Mirror Entity says after your opponent plays a minion. I didn't know that. So see, this is why reading stuff is important. So Mirror Entity says after your opponent plays a minion, summon a copy of it. So this is actually super important. Disregard what I just said. Mirror Entity says after your opponent plays a minion, summon a copy of it. So that is a big distinction to make in the text of that card, and we'll answer this question for us. Potion of Polymorph says after your opponent plays a minion, transform it into a 1/1 sheep. If you get Mirror Entity down prior to getting Potion of Polymorph down, you will copy the minion and then you will turn it into a 1/1 sheep. If it's the other way around, you will turn it into a 1/1 sheep and then copy the minion. So think about that. Ordering here is very paramount to the way that this ends up working out. So maybe that's not a combo you want to try to fully explore. But the thing about it is the ordering here matters because of that characteristic in the text. But otherwise, a super cool card. You know, a lot of times you think about a situation, you're like, well, how could I answer a Ragnaros? I don't have any life left, and all these minions are really important. The answer is Potion of Polymorph. If you can time when your opponent's going to play Ragnaros and you play Potion of Polymorph, you have dealt with the Ragnaros. You've dealt with it proactively. And that takes precedent in a lot of situations too, where, say, you're playing against like an Azoth build, and you need to make sure that they don't get another... what's it called? Like Sylvanas or Cairn or something. You can proactively play this when you anticipate that happening and try to offset that. It'll force your opponent's play. And so this is an example of disruption that can come with a negative effect, but can also be a very positive effect depending on how your game is panned out in front of it. It's a super interesting card. How does this interact with Jaraxxus? So here's something interesting to note. So I'll make this distinction real quick as well. So we'll look up Jaraxxus real quick. Oh, does Jaraxxus have 1x in it? What the heck's going on? Oh, I'm in Mage, that's why. Battlecry. Destroy your hero and replace it with Lord Jaraxxus. So you become the 15 health Jaraxxus when that happens. If you look at Sacred Trial, after your opponent has at least 3 minions and plays another, destroy it. It doesn't say destroy that minion, it says destroy it. So I think that's an important distinction to make here, where if your opponent has 3 minions in play, they play Jaraxxus, Sacred Trial destroys it, you lose the game. You become Jaraxxus, it gets destroyed. With Potion of Polymorph, it says transform it into a 1/1 sheep. Well, you can't be a 1/1 sheep. I don't think you can anyway. And so I'm guessing this probably doesn't transform Jaraxxus from that standpoint. Now that I'm not entirely sure. Maybe you do become a 1/1 sheep with a sheep hero power. I don't know. Maybe that's another hero that's added into the game and goes from there. Yes, and it's a potion. I'm glad you pointed that out, Addy. I referenced this earlier with one of the tri-class cards. It says add a random potion to your hand. This is one of the potions that can get added to your hand with that card. So that's definitely a big deal. Yes, Potion of Polymorph, it's great versus Gadgetzan Auctioneer. It's so hard for your opponent to play Gadgetzan Auctioneer and have a big combo turn if you have Potion of Polymorph set up. And so that's something that your opponent has to think about with a situation like that. And so that will tend to increase the number of things like Swashbuckler, I think, that gets played in some of those builds so that they can have a prerequisite to check for the hero power. And then as soon as they know, at the cost of 1 mana, they have continued to go afterwards. So it may actually also yield more Sousy deckhands in those instances as well, if a lot of the secret builds start becoming popular. That's something to really think about as well. Yeah, Potion Polymorph. This is a cool card. I'm really liking this card. An example of what you can do with turn-based games to create interaction and disruption on your opponent's turn. It's not necessarily all about being just minion heavy on board. Sometimes it's about having key cards and key matchups. I think it's much more of a card that's going to hit combo decks more than just about anything else. Cryomancer, 5 mana, 5/5, gain +2/+2 if an enemy is frozen. Not an exciting card. I'm not really going to go into too much about this one. Something that's really cool is it's 5 mana, 5/5 that could potentially have upside, but for the most part, this seems like a weak card that's not very inspiring to me. We talked a little bit about Cabal Lackey. And something that's really interesting to note with me about this card is that Mage now is going to have 6 1-cost minions that it can reasonably play. You have Mana Worm, you have Babbling Book, and now you have Cabal Lackey. If you look at a deck like a Zoo build, for instance, one of the things that you want to have in Zoo builds is 6 1-cost things that you can play on the board and start getting the damage going. Does this build open up possibilities for any like Mage Zoo-ish style builds? Because prior to this, the only aggro decks we've seen, whoa, EU best server, just subscribe, Fartless 1 months and Fartless God blesses, welcome EU best server to the esports gaming team. It pains me to say it, but believe it or not, it brings our weekly sub count up for the week. We are now at 16 of 17 subscribers. We just need one more to hit our goal. Hashtag Kappa, hashtag sellout. But having those 6 1-drops you can play mean that you can lead into your 2-drops more often, which means you can lead into 3-drops more often, which means you can take advantage of the board presence, use your burn spells to finish the game more often. That is certainly a big deal when you're thinking about it, is having the extra 1-drop. Because what is Mage going to play if it doesn't have... Oh, I clicked the wrong one. Excuse me. What is Mage going to play for 1-drops if it doesn't have Mana Worm and Babbling Book? I mean, the rest of your options are not really good options. Like, there's just nothing strong at the 1 slot for these decks. The problem with this build is that your 3-drops suddenly turn into all secrets. That's a bit of an issue. Because you've got to have a secret for this guy to be getting his true value. But if you're playing Counterspell, and you're playing Mirror Entity, and you're playing not Vaporize or Spellbender, I mean, your 3rd one's basically going to be Polymorph Bore a lot. How good is a Polymorph Bore on turn 1? Well, it's not very good. Is Effigy going to be not nearly as good because you're getting sometimes a 1-cost minion off of this? There's a lot of weird things that are going on with this card where it's going to require a lot of deck building to figure out whether or not this thing's going to have a real home. But it's an interesting card, and I think it opens up a dynamic. You know, something that I always loved was Kirin Tormage. Oh, you guys can't see these cards because I don't have the thing up. It's Kirin Tormage. This has been one of my favorite cards for a long time because of its ability to provide such a big tempo swing in one single turn. You know, I played this in 2014 when I made it to top 16 NA for Hammerstein to try to get to BlizzCon. I fell short there, but the Mage build was like one of my favorite things to do. And with Cabal Lackey, you're kind of getting that idea. Like, the possibility is there to start building secret decks again, but how much of the deck's going to become watered down because of that? That's going to require a lot of tinkering and a lot of stuff to go with before you figure that out. A really cool card. I love this card a lot. Doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, but it's a really cool card. Did I miss something here? I just saw someone say something in chat, and I thought you were referring to a point that I missed. I don't see Addy saying anything. Oh, what's up, Rocker? How's it going, man? Mage needs more card draw before this guy gets run, I think. I don't know, man. I think Arcane Intellect's pretty good. You could be right, though. Maybe it does need more card draw. If that's the case, maybe Loot Hoarder becomes one of your drops. Yeah, Dim Frost. That's another possibility, too, is that Cabal Lackey can actually activate Medivh's Valet going into turn 2. And that's something you previously have not really been able to do without a turn 1 Mad Scientist, which in Standard, you don't have that. Yeah, that's a possibility too, Botaby. Maybe you save it to play a secret and something else alongside the secret. You know, maybe it's like a turn 4, you play that guy, you play Flamewaker, you play a secret alongside of it. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff you can do with that card. Accelerations, cheating mana curves is always something to think about, because those effects tend to be very powerful. Freezing Potion, 0-cost freeze an enemy minion. Not really a very inspiring card, but 0-cost cards are always something to look at, especially when they have effects that can really drive tempo. Something I see with this card is that maybe there's an option to play Shatter, sometimes literally because of this. And I know it seems kind of weird and wonky to say, but 0 mana is way different than 1 mana. And if you don't think it's the case, just reference my good buddy Emperor Thorson and what he does to Living Roots with Malygos. Obviously, this card doesn't have that same potential there, but 0-cost cards that have effects on them that are desirable are definitely things to think about. The problem with it is that it's incredibly weak if you're not taking advantage of it. But I can see this card being really strong in the right situations. Oh, that's something really interesting to think about, actually, is that you can play Flamewaker and just freeze their big minion, so that way they can't trade into it. So sometimes you're able to play Flamewaker higher than when you normally could because your opponent's relying on minion pressure to get it done. Maybe you play Sylvanas and freeze their 5/5, and going into their next turn, they're like, crap, I can't play anything. If I play anything, he's just going to run into my 5/5 and take it. Little things like that is something to think about. Like, how does this affect the dynamic of the game and the way that games are actually being played? A lot of that's just going to come with metagame stuff. You know, right out the gate, this card's not getting played. But, you know, say a month into it, some decks, some particular archetypes become really popular. Maybe you see this couple with something like Sylvanas to really punish people for trying to have a really heavy turn 6, turn 7, turn 8 scaling. Something to really think about. This card's, it's interesting to me. It's interesting because it's like a tech choice more than anything else. You have to time that card right. Paladin, one of my favorites. One of my favorite classes, I think, in the entire set is Paladin, and it starts all with this card right here. 3 mana, 2/2, Divine Shield, Taunt. Whenever this minion deals damage, you heal for that much as well. Wow, this card is super cool. I love this card. This card is something that I feel like is the exact type of card that can really punish more of the face builds. And let's put it against Zoo for his example. Like, imagine this card was just a 3 mana 2/2 with Divine Shield and Taunt. Heck, let's even say it was like a 2/3. This card suffers from the same problems that a lot of the other small, really fight for the board cards do, which is they get run over by certain cards and don't really give you anything from it. And so now, instead of this card being, I took 6 damage from Flame Imp, and it trades a front half of a Possessed Villager and the Flame Imp for it, you get to restore some of that life. Against Imp King Boss, when your opponent runs in that Possessed Villager and then runs in the Imp King Boss, sure, they're killing your card very effectively, but you got extra 4 life. Is that extra 4 life enough to help get the job done in those situations? And that's just from turn 3. This isn't taking into account hand buff mechanics, where if this guy gets big enough, you are able to play this, and sometimes it'll be a 3/3. Sometimes it'll be a 7/7 with Don Honcho. The ability to have Don Honcho on turn 7, and then on turn 9 have Equality, Consecration, and then this guy, holy crap, that is huge. That is a lot of stats and a lot of stuff you're getting from a card that is already very flexible. You know, picture against Druid, for instance. You play this card, and your opponent has to hero power it and then attack it with like Arcane Giant or something. You got 4 extra life, and you staved off 9 points of damage. That's a 13-point heal in that situation. Now, that's not always going to be the case, but this card is great. And something that Paladin has really suffered from is a lack of 3-cost cards that really have a huge board impact by themselves. And you take it, like, pit it against Aldor Peacekeeper, for instance. It's really tough to play Aldor Peacekeeper on turn 3 if your opponent doesn't have a minion in play, but sometimes you just have to continue fighting for the board. This card isn't that way. I mean, this card can be played at almost every stage of the game and be effective in some way. That is a tremendously strong card. And the other thing, too, is it's interesting on top of that. Like, when you play this card, your opponent has to think about, is he going to Blessing of Kings this? Am I going to get steamrolled if I don't take care of this right away? This is a card that can really provide disruption against certain kinds of opponents. You know, think about against Hunter, for instance, when you've cleared their board and then they just jam Savannah Highmane down. You're like, well, can't do anything now. Well, now you just play this guy. It's tough to deal with. It's like a really strong Annoyantron, basically. So this is a card I love. It's got great art. It's got a great feel to it. It's a unique mechanic. It's everything Paladin wants. And then we take a drastically different turn with Small Time Recruits. Draw 3 1-cost minions from your deck. So something I think is really cool with this card is that it gives Paladin a reason to play a bunch of 1-cost minions that it wants to play. Like, if you look at Paladin in general, I'm going to click off this real quick so we can just take a look at Paladin stuff. If we just look at Paladin and we look at all the 1-cost minions it has, it kind of wants to play all of these. Where it starts with Selfless Hero. You do sometimes just want 1/3s in your build to use Abusive Sergeant with, so Wild Inquisitor I think is a reasonable option. Abusive Sergeant is great not only with your hero power, but the other minions you want to play. It's great with Argent Squire. Sometimes the decks want buffs and they use Dragon Egg. There's a lot of good stuff that Paladin can reasonably play on 1 mana. You can play Southsea Deckhand, you can play Worgen Infiltrator, you can play Finley. The problem with these cards is when you have this many of them in your deck, you water down your build and your draw density just becomes absolutely atrocious as you enter the late game. Not only that, but I also want to point out the next card that we have coming up, which this card will help you gas up with those cards and then try to overwhelm your opponent with those. But you have Mean Street Marshal to go alongside it, which is a fantastic card. 1 mana, 1/2. If it has 2 or more attack, when it dies, you draw a card. So this is getting buffed from a lot of the Paladin mechanics that are out there, and you can fill your hand up with these cards, buff them, and then keep going later on. It thins out your deck so that you're not drawing these 1-cost cards as much. So you can justify playing some of your heavier curve in there, knowing that some of it's going to be pulled out of your deck with Small Time Recruits. There's a lot of stuff to think about with a card like this, where it doesn't really seem like much that you're drawing 3 1-cost minions from your deck, but you have to think about how that affects the game overall and also affects the way that you can build your deck. Kilogram Hour is another good point here. I think the card's better than Divine Favor is you actually get card advantage on your opponent, and this is never a dead card. The fact that it's not often a dead card, it's very rare for it to be a dead card if you have a lot of 1-drops in your deck, is really important. The other thing to note is that it doesn't require the same setup as the other ones play. You're able to just use that card and then fill up your hand and keep going. I think that's a really big deal when you take into consideration how Small Time Recruits is going to work in conjunction with cards just like this one, where you have a lot of ways to keep the gas going by just flooding the board with small little minions. I think it's really cool. OMG, this voice. Is this the usual commentator? What's up, Key MTG? I'm a Hearthstone commentator, actually. That's what I do. This year I did Spring Championships for Asia Pacific. I did America's Preliminaries. I did America's Championship. I worked Last Call for Americas, and I did Opening Weekend BlizzCon, as well as just a number of other events as well. Like I did the PAX event for One Nation of Gamers at PAX. Was it Prime? I think it's Prime, the one in Seattle, the big one in Seattle. And I've just done a lot of online events, and I've been commentating Hearthstone for about 3 years now. Paladin weapon gives a 1/1 buff. There's a lot of cool Paladin cards that get buffs in this one, and I think honestly it's such a cool direction I think for Paladin to take, because one of the feelings I get from Paladin is like strength in numbers, and so I think that this card overall is giving Paladin like a really strong feel of what the design of the class is meant to feel like and meant to be like. And then Mean Street Marshal gives you wonderful options to play alongside of that. We take a drastic turn when we go to Grime Street Protector here. 7 mana, 6/6 taunt, Battlecry, give adjacent minions Divine Shield. A really powerful effect in the right situation, and something that I think Paladin has really suffered from is a really weak turn 7. That's something really to think about. Does this card fight too much against what other Paladin builds are doing? And I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. It's giving you options on how to sometimes build your Paladin decks. But if you have board presence, this card can very much be a closer in a lot of those situations in some matchups where you get to give your guys Divine Shield, you get to kill their stuff for almost free in those situations, or you just get to reinforce a board very heavily and keep going. The fact that it has Taunt, I think, is really strong versus aggro decks, where you get to keep your guys healthy so they don't get traded back into very easily. And you also have a Taunt body that stands in the way, and this rolls you right into your Tyrion and your Ragnaros Lightlord turns. So sometimes you can even keep those Divine Shielded minions from getting injured, so that way your Ragnaros Lightlord can always heal yourself. A lot of cool stuff is happening with an effect like this one, and it's really situational, but that's the thing about situational, is you have to size up what the situation is. In this one, it's having board presence, and then the second one is having follow-up to it. So the situation you create is already incredibly powerful at times, but you're also getting a good-sized body, and you're getting that card advantage from it. So the situation here probably worth a lot of the trade-off in these spots. The only thing that really would make this powerful is if he summoned 2 Boombots on the other side. I don't think this card's like going to be staple by any means, but this seems like a very powerful card to me that I can totally see making its way into some of the scaling Paladin builds. Grime Street Enforcer, 5 mana, 4/4. At the end of your turn, give all minions in your hand +1/+1. To me, this seems like a bit much. I think Paladin has also struggled with having really strong 5-drops, but this one doesn't really provide you the immediate impact I think that you're looking for. You have some cheaper versions of this that kind of do the same thing, but you know, how often is this guy going to stick and play for 2 turns? And when it does stick and play for 2 turns, like how often would just an Azure Drake have won you the game because you had a 4/4 second play and it drew you a card? This one seems a little bit too weak to me, I think, to really justify playing. I'm not going to give it too much thought. Getaway Kodo. Not really a big fan of this card. When a friendly minion dies, return it to your hand. This is good with Battle Cries, but it's really bad with most of your cards, honestly. Like, I could see it being okay with, like, this guy, for instance, the Grime Street Outfitter, where give all minions in your hand +1/+1. That's a really cool effect to follow up the small... I don't even remember what the name of this card was. The 3-mana one. Small Time Recruits. I wanted to say Small Time Recruits, and I didn't. It's really great after that because you get to buff all the stuff in your hand, but is Getaway Kodo a card you can really dedicate into your deck when you're playing cards like this? You know, you take a look at it, and ideally you have more minions in your hand when you buff them, so you can already not afford to play as many spells as you were. Is getting back a Grime Street Outfitter or some of the other random little stuff you're playing, is that any good? And then is there anything in the 5 to the 4+ range that you really want to put back in your hand when it dies? Like, is Redemption just going to be better in those situations? Most of the time, yeah. Like, the situations I think it's an exception is like Ragnaros and Ragnaros Lightlord. Those are about the only two situations where I think that putting it back in your hand could be better. Does it still trigger Death Rattles? Yeah, Death Rattles go off, and then it basically puts a copy of it in your hand. Is basically what it's doing. I don't know, maybe it's good for like Murlocs or something. That could be a situation I think where it's okay. No way. It can't be good for Murlocs because you would rather just have them in play and then die again. Yeah, I don't know, that card's just... I think it's just worse than Redemption. Except in fringe situations. It's way too situational, I think, to use. Grime Street Outfitter, though, this is the card that's really feeding into that one-drop strategy, where you can play something on turn 1. If your opponent doesn't play anything significant, or they play something that's like too significant, you get to drop this and look to recover the game at a later stage. But this is a lot of effective stats on a 2-mana card sometimes. It just depends on the right situation. But the situation here is just having little stuff to play. Chances on Secret Paladin coming back. Now, I will say, Tess, that is an interesting one, is when you play Mysterious Challenger and you get the... Getaway Kodo, and then you get to play Mysterious Challenger again. I didn't actually think about that. Huh. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that seems good. No, it doesn't work because the Noble Sacrifice is getting put back in your hand. This card sucks. No way, I'm done thinking about this card. It sucks. Don't worry about it. Smuggler's Run. Give all minions in your hand +1/+1. I struggle to see a way that this is really any better than Grime Street Outfitter. And of course, the one exception to that rule is always, well, can you just cheat the secrets directly into play? Yeah, in those situations, yeah. But Smuggler's Run, I think, is going to be really inferior. You're going to be wanting dropping 1-cost cards anyway. But Smuggler's Run just, nah. It's a cool option, but again, you want to be... If you're going to play this buff strategy, like, maybe one Smuggler's Run, but Competitive Spirit's going to be okay in those situations. Just, I don't see these secrets really making the cut if you're playing these aggro paladin strategies. This guy's really cool, though, the Grimscale Chum. Give a random Murloc in your hand +1/+1. So, that doesn't seem like that strong of an effect, but something to really think about again is when you go type in Murloc into this thing, what do we end up getting from this? So, the first one to note is that Vilephan Inquisitor, I think, can get played in a lot of these Paladin builds, simply because it's a 1-mana 1/3, and the 1-mana 1/3 can help you trade up a little bit. You're going to be playing Finley in a lot of these Paladin strategies. Is there any reason that we can maybe go more of a Murloc theme and play like Murloc Tidecaller? If that's the case, can Vilephan Tidehunter become a little bit better? Is Bluegill Warrior ever making the cut in some of these situations? And once you start getting to the 3-mana era, it starts to really teeter off. But then you look at Zubat. Is Zubat in the right Murloc builds? Is this acting like an old like a pre-nerf Shattered Sun Cleric when that card was just bonkers and in every single deck? 0-mana 2/2 Tiny Fin. I mean, the ability to play this on turn 1, get a 2/1, and then play a 2/2 alongside of it. It's a lot of stats for those cards. I mean, there's little things like that. They're not going to add up to a ton immediately, but the thing about it is you're trying to overwhelm your opponent with strategies like that. Do you have the gas to get the job done? I don't know, but we have a lot of tools to try to work with on that particular front right now. And that's something to really think about, is how you can overwhelm your opponent, and do you have the gas to get it done? Well, this guy's offering you a lot for very little if that's the direction you want to take. So that's something I think that you're going to have to try out and see for yourself afterwards. Maybe it doesn't make the cut, but I can definitely see in a lot of aggro paladin decks, if that deck becomes successful, Grimscale Chum being kind of a key to that. You know, imagine playing the small-time recruits and then playing Grimscale Chum, and then it buffs another one, and then you play your Murloc. Like, that's a lot of stats for this little bit of stuff. Some cool things to think about. Moving into Priest, I think Priest has gotten probably some of the most needed help out of all the classes. I think a lot of classes have a lot of different ways to do stuff now, but Priest was just not competing before. And in order for it to compete in general, it was like already really fringe situations that like were these wacky states where Priest would work. And that's really unfortunate for a lot of people, because a lot of people enjoy this class. I haven't been one of them, but that's mostly because the class has sucked. And so when you look at some of the cards they're getting now, it is some really powerful stuff. And it's really interesting to look at, because this is the class I think that needed it more than anything else. So it just wasn't competing. And you are going to have a weakest class. There is not a single time you're going to have 9 unique classes that have 9 different playstyles, that have 9 different identities, and not have one that's weak. That's just actually impossible. That's not the way that things work. Everyone wants everything to be balanced perfectly, but I'll tell you what, if you look at chess pieces, the knight can be stronger than a queen, but it has to be in the absolute perfect situation. And because it's not as strong as a queen, the queen is a better piece. And in Hearthstone right now, I tell you what, Priest was basically the H-file pawn. You're never moving it, and it just sits there for a long time. And if you get to the right situation, sure, that H-file can march up and become a queen, but that takes a long time to set up, and it's not very effective. I promise you, if you're going to H4 right off the bat, you have lost the game versus anyone competent. And so this is where we start with Raz of the Chained. 5-mana 5/5, already reasonable stats. And it has a really unique thing on it, which is oftentimes Priest is about a lot of tech choices. So you're kind of exacerbating that by having this very powerful effect on that, where Priest is going to maybe suffer from some inconsistencies, but your hero power costs 0 this game. Priest hero power is really good. The problem with Priest hero power is using it. It costs you 2 mana, and all the good Priest cards are really expensive. So when you have a card like this, you can now play it and then continue to scale and then keep using your hero power. And that's a big deal when you get to the later stages and you need to play Entombs and you need to play Ragnaros and you need to play Mind Control. But you also need to be healing, because that healing oftentimes is offsetting, say, Steady Shot from your Hunter opponent. This card offers that potential, and it also gives you a good body. What cost is that at? It's at deck building. But this card can be enormous in certain situations. And something else to think about is maybe you can couple this with Shadow Form at some step of the way, where you don't need to heal anymore. You can make a transition, and suddenly that 2 damage has become free. Well, those are all little things that add up to a lot at the end of the day. And that's a lot of what Priest has been about, is incremental advantage. And over time, this card can really add up. So I think if you're building Priest, this is a great place to start, because you have Raz of the Chained, you have Kazakus, and you have Reno Jackson to be 3 powerful effects that you can use. Now, 2 of them aren't quite as game-winning as what Reno Jackson can provide a lot of times, but this card is great, and is certainly a place to start. I think if Priest is going to go that direction, this could very easily be the card that makes that happen. Very much so. Dragonfire Potion, one of the potions you can get from that 4-mana 3/3 that we were talking about earlier, where it says add a random potion in your hand. 6 mana, deal 5 damage to all minions except dragons. So it's pretty much spelling itself out right now, where I'd say the strongest Priest build is probably Dragon Priest. But one of the issues with this card is that, does Dragon Priest need to have an effect like that? Like, most of the time Dragon Priest loses, it's because it can't stabilize the board position because you got overwhelmed too early. So if that's the case, then Dragonfire Potion is fitting more into control-style builds than it will be into Dragon-style builds. Now, that's to say it won't be played in Dragon-style builds, but the thing is it's adding the potential for control to have one of those big board sweeps. With the real problem with that, once again, being Azure Drake, where Azure Drake is super powerful with the 5-drop slot in basically every build right now. This card's not killing it. Priest, we've got a great tool to work with, but they still need Shadow Word Azure Drake. And that's an issue. And I think that's one of the reasons why you're seeing so many strong 5-cost cards in a lot of classes, is because they're trying to discourage people from playing Azure Drake all the time. Because, frankly, I don't want to play against a metagame where every single deck uses Azure Drake. Even like Paladins at the 8th slot in terms of power level are using Azure Drake in some of these builds, simply because it's a 5-mana 4/4 that draws a card. So in Dragon Priest, this card is sometimes insane. But if you're able to take the board, it's probably just a regular 6-mana deal 5 damage thing to try to recover the board state. But in regular Priest decks, you're still going to run into the problem of when your opponent has like random good dragon cards, this doesn't quite get the job done. So this is one that I think is being overestimated at power level a little bit. I certainly think it's strong, but Light Bomb I think was a stronger card. The problem is that Priest cards sucked just about as much then as they do now. So this definitely will find a nice home in some of the decks, but don't expect this to be the reason that Priest turns around. I think that there's more cards coming up that are going to be the reason. And one of them could potentially be Mana Geode. Mana Geode is a card to me that says, if you are playing a weaker curve-style deck, Mana Geode can punish you. But if you're more dedicated to the early game with Abusive Sergeants and Imp Gang Boss and stuff, this card not quite as good. But something I think this is great at is actually like punishing a lot of Shaman spots, where they say they roll a Searing Totem on turn 2. You now get to attack it and make another 2/2. And that's a really tough time for Shaman all of a sudden, is when you get to duplicate that board presence. And in order to get totem position, they have to kill 2 things instead of 1. So that's something to really think about with this card. It doesn't snowball super hard because at the end of the day it's a 2/3. So anytime your opponent plays a 3/3, this card has now been checked by that one. Or it's been challenged by that one, rather. So this card doesn't offer the same snowball potential unless your opponent's playing more of a dedicated early game deck. Like picture the Paladin builds, for instance. They're playing lots of 1/1s. Against that deck, Mana Geode's going to just trounce them. But if you're playing against Zoo, Mana Geode doesn't quite offer the same potential, but it still offers good potential. And it's a card that Priest really needed, because if you look at all the other Priest 2-drops, they're usually very situational. And so we'll just go do it this way, for instance, where Lightwell is unplayable card. None of these affect a board state early on. Like, literally none of these cards affect a board state early on. Museum Curator, 2-mana 1/2. This builds into a later position, and so it just dies. It's on the board. Wear Message, it requires you to have a dragon in your hand. Shadow Word Pain, a very flexible card that in some matchups you literally can't afford to use on turn 2, but sometimes you have to use it on turn 2. Purify, obviously, and Resurrect. Once again, these are all situational build-up cards. And now finally, there's one that isn't necessarily a situational build-up card. You can just play this on curve and get going. And if your opponent doesn't kill it immediately or doesn't challenge it right away, maybe you have Power Word Shield to go with it. Anything that's going to affect this in the long term can be really cool. So this is a card that I think it's giving Priest a dynamic it just frankly didn't have before. And that's the most important part of the card to me. And as Red Slime is mentioning this, I was actually going to skip down to this card, but it's quite a bit away. There's also a card in the set that affects it a lot too, and we'll get to that one. But we'll start with Draconid Operative. 5 mana 5/6. If you're holding a dragon, discover a card in your opponent's deck. This card's really unexciting to me. And one of the reasons why is because it's not necessarily replacing Azure Drake, because Azure Drake's always going to draw a card. But if you have Azure Drake and you have Blackwing Corruptor, can you play another 5-drop in that slot? Especially if you have, say, the Dragonfire Potion in your deck. Maybe you can, but I think this card's being a little bit overestimated. It's certainly strong for its cost. And it offers you that refund potential. This is, I think, a lot stronger versus Control than it is versus some of the aggro builds. But against the aggro builds, I'm not sure this is really getting the job done. I think you need something else in this slot to really affect that. I definitely think it's good, but you have to be holding a dragon for this to work. And so a lot of times, if you run it a gas and you have Azure Drake by itself, Azure Drake, you can just play it immediately, you draw a card. But with this one, you're trading off that guaranteed draw for stats. So maybe that is something Priest really wants. I could definitely see it replacing Azure Drake, but I don't think it's quite as strong as people are giving it credit for. But you do also get the benefit of information. Say you discover a weird tech card from your opponent's build that you can help play around. Sometimes this is going to draw you a much larger threat than Azure Drake would have. I think that's a really big deal as well. But there are trade-offs to it, and so that's something to really think about. Again, I do think this will replace Azure Drake. But it's not like the greatest upgrade in the world. It's just something that you have. It's slightly stronger, and so it helps the overall power level of that deck. But something else to think about is drawing a card from your opponent's deck sometimes is just worse than drawing one from your own. That's definitely something else to think about. Like say you're playing against an aggro build, for instance. You probably want to draw your own cards rather than your opponent's, because you're going to draw a Flame Imp, or you're going to draw like an Infested Wolf or something weird. Like, I don't know. It seems like a lot of weak cards you can draw versus versus aggro builds, but versus Control, it's a different scaling. So it's really tough. Why not play both? So the reason to not play both is because you're just starting to clutter your 5-drop slot at that point, where you'd have Azure Drake, you'd have Operative, and you'd have Blackwing Corruptor. Like, Blackwing Corruptor is by far the superior of those three because it's affecting the board state. So I think you're often going to have to make a choice between this and Azure Drake when you play those two. And I think most people are going to lean towards this. And one of the reasons why is because I think that when you're playing the Dragon Priest builds, a lot of times having an access from one of your opponent's cards is going to be a lot more powerful. At turn 5, you've kind of done most of your scaling at that point. And so having utility is going to be something maybe that's really desirable. And something Priest is really lacking in a Dragon Priest build is utility. So that's something else to really think about. But who knows? You will get a better draw quality in some matchups than you will in some matchups, and in other ones you'll get a worse draw quality. Just depends on the situation. Greater Healing Potion. 4 mana, restore 12 health to a friendly character. Wow. Seems awful. Something to really note here is that it says friendly, so they don't want you to be able to embrace the shadows or Auchenai Soul Priest this. I think it's just weaker than Flash Heal. Like, how much health do you need to restore before you really end up playing a card like this? I don't think 12 is it. It's a lot of health for one card, but, I mean, how often are you like, oh, if I could only just heal for 12 right now? I think in most of those situations, Priest of the Feast is getting a better job done. Forbidden Healing is also awful. Well, turns out it was. I mean, Paladin pretty much sucks right now, caffeinated. It pretty much sucks. Reno Priest, maybe I could definitely see it in there. Like a big healing effect is something desirable, but you know, how game-changing really is that? I don't know. This is really hard to evaluate. Reno's also giving you like board presence when you play it, and it's just like a really big deal for that card. Healing Touch isn't played. It's 3 mana, 8 health, but you're paying 1 more mana for 4 more health. I don't really know, because 8 health isn't really that much, and I think that's part of the reason that card doesn't get played. Like, Feral Rage very often doubles as a Healing Touch, but it can double as 4 damage also. It also can't heal you above 30. That's a big thing to think about. Would be good versus Alex Straza. Yeah, like if say you're playing as Freeze Mage, they Alex you and you get to a greater healing potion in Shadow or Death. But I can see it. I can see it in certain metagame calls. Overall, this is going to be a tech choice more than anything else. This is not going to change the way you play Priest, though. That's really, I guess, where I want to go with that statement. Is I think overall, whoops, I didn't want to click that. I think overall, this gives you another good tech choice, but it's not like a game changer. So, something to think about. Pint-sized potion. Give all enemy minions -3 attack this turn only. Yeah, that's alright, I guess. Like, you definitely wanted something that's like in where Shrinkmeister was missing, but you don't get a 3/2 body. So, you get to affect all of them, but how often do you really need to affect all your opponent's minions to -3 health? Not very often, I'd say. Now, is the -3 better than -2? I think time will tell on that one. 5 mana 5/5, Battlecry Silence a Minion. Holy crap, I didn't see that card yet. Wow, that card's good. Holy guacamole. It's a pretty boring card, but man, that is good. Five mana. My gosh. I'm curious how good that's going to be with like more scaling stuff floating around, because that's what it feels like the direction of a lot of the set's moving towards, is like heavier scaling. And when everything's scaling a lot heavier, that makes Sylvanas a lot better. So with Sylvanas getting a lot better, you needed more answers to Sylvanas. And that would explain a lot of the cards printed in this deck so far. Or in the set so far, rather. Alright, I can see it. I think this is a good card, but I don't think it's like insane. Okay, I'm convinced. This card is reasonable. At first I saw this, I was like, what? And then I realized 5 minutes is a lot. It's a lot. Okay. Silence Tyrion, that's a big deal. Yeah, I can see this getting played. I don't think it's going to be insane, but I could definitely see this being like a one-of. Cabal Talon Priest, on the other hand. Whoa! This card's scary. 3 mana 3/4. Decent stat line. Give a friendly minion +3 health. So, if you look at Dark Cultist required you to have that card live to be able to dictate where its presence went. And so that meant if you had like a 2/2 or 2/3 out, and then you played Dark Cultist, it would provide disruption against your opponent in the fact that they'd have to kill the 2/2 first and hope to leverage against the fact that you paid 3 mana for a 3/4 that didn't have immediate board impact. But this affects things immediately, and that is terrifying for some of the aggro decks, where if you get to play, say, Mana Geode on turn 2, and then you get to play Cabal Talon Priest on turn 3, you now have a 2 mana 2/6 and a 3 mana 3/4. And the 2 mana 2/6 can kind of, I don't want to say proliferate, because it's not quite proliferating, but it's building your board presence and just giving you extra value. And so as a result of that, you may find like this being sort of the bread and butter of Priest decks, is Geode into Talon Priest, and hoping that's enough pressure to keep the control decks actually actively having to do something to find opportunities for yourself, but then also provides you an adequate way to actually fight against aggro decks, where it will at some point kind of devolve into a race. Maybe that's where Greater Healing Potion gets played. Ah. Okay. I see what you're doing here, Blizzard. You're trying to give Priest options. Okay, I get it. That's fine. Give Priest options. You guys wanted this, by the way. You guys asked for this, and I think you're getting it. You're going to see some really strong priest stuff happening because there's a lot of good cards. Like these are absolute game-changing cards for priest so far. Holy moly. That is sick. I'm trying to think of like a situation where this card's just bad and it's hard. That's really hard to think. I mean, this is a card I think you could like play in Dragon Priest and it just look totally good. Woo! That's a good card. Potion of Madness. This is one of my favorite cards in the set. Gain control of an enemy minion with 2 attack or less until end of turn. So you get to attack with this card when you take it. Something that I think is really cool about this card is that it gives priests the ability to fight the early game battles that are taking place against aggro decks, but at the same time, it's not like a super heavily scaling card into the late game. So this isn't like Living Roots, for instance, where its services is the ability to help fight against aggro at early, and then at late game you get to couple with Malygos and kill your opponent. This is a card that's kind of squashing your opponent's aggro attempts sometimes, and in the late game, maybe you get punished for having this, because it's just kind of a dead card. This is a really interesting one where you get to destroy people who opened up like Flame Imp and then play Dark Peddler. You get to take the Dark Peddler and kill their Flame Imp. Like, that's a massive amount of swing that you're getting for this card. Yeah, I really like this. I think in a lot of situations, this will act as like a small AoE card. That's really cool. And again, to me, one of the biggest issues with this is that it's not scaling super heavily into the late game, so that you get these crazy priest decks that get to destroy everything your opponent plays, then also kill you with the cards that they didn't have to use. I like it. I think it's really cool. This could combo with the Shrink spell card. You could take a 5-attack minion that way. You only take it until end of turn, mind you. So you have to be able to use that minion when it happens. Has to be able to use that minion when it happens. But that's a strong card versus aggro decks. You can kind of see why aggro decks, I think, are maybe taking a backseat. We'll move on to Rogue now, which Rogue... personally, I think Rogue's got some really powerful cards, but... some of them, to me, don't seem so powerful. And I think this is a good example of one. 3 mana, 2/3 stealth. Whenever this attacks, add a random card to your hand from your opponent's class. Is this better than Huckster? Is this better than Swashbuckler? Is it good enough to play in combination with those? So, I don't know. I don't think it is. I think that's something that's really difficult to justify for 3 mana because you have not only some interesting 3 mana options in this set, but you also don't necessarily need a card from your opponent's class. I don't know. This one seems really boring to me. When it lives, it's really good, but how often do 3 health stuff live? I guess it is kind of like a lightning rod where your opponent really does need to kill it. And so can that open you up to playing something stronger later on? Like if you play this and they have to kill it after you attack, or say you play this, your opponent can't kill it. You get to attack and kill their small minion. You backstab and kill another minion, then you play Tomb Pillager. You now have a Tomb Pillager and you have Shaku out. Is that situation maybe enough to kind of force your opponent out of the game sometimes? Ah, okay. Alright, I'm on board to try this card. I just don't think it's that good. I'm kind of convincing myself here, honestly, but the big value of this card is that if it sticks around on board after your attack and your opponent can't challenge directly and you get to drop another priority minion alongside of it, you now have 2 priority minions in play really early. That's something that's really scary to think about, is because that's a really easy way to win games, is that you get to exacerbate the situation that your opponent's fighting against anyway. So like against a control deck, for instance, you get to play this on turn 3, they can't just Fiery War Axe it, and then you get to play Tomb Pillager and attack them. So you refunded the card, and now they have to use their Fiery War Axe to either couple with something and kill the Tomb Pillager, or they have to have another card in their hand that can kill this, and then also be able to kill the Tomb Pillager. Like that's a pretty dire situation for some people. Yeah, that's a big one. Don't forget cards that can get buffed in your hand nowadays. Do any of the buffs actually... Can they get played in Rogue? Like, Don Honcho can't get played in Rogue, right? Or can it get played in Rogue? I don't think... Rogue is a Jade Golem one. I don't think it has any of the buffs in hand available for that one. Lotus Assassin. I actually really like this card. I think it's really cool. 5 mana, 5/5. Stealth whenever this attacks and kills a minion, gain stealth. So Stranglethorn Tiger was already almost good enough to get played in Rogue. It's really close. But Lotus Assassin, I think, is way putting that effect over the top. I think this can very easily get played in a lot of rogue situations where, number one, against control decks, it's just dealing 5 damage, which is already really strong. Number two is when you're playing against more of like a mid-rangey or mid-sized decks, you're able to kill sometimes 2 things with this, or sometimes it kills something and then also deals 5 damage on the following turn. This is one that can really be troublesome with a lot of what your opponent's game plans are against what you're trying to do. And that's something to really think about, is cards that offer these grand potential payoffs in the right situation. Because frankly, it's just not that bad of a card to begin with. It's already statted evenly with Stranglethorn Tiger, and it offers this massive potential upside. So I think Lotus Assassin is actually really seeded to be a card that can change the way that some of the rogue decks work, where maybe you can build rogue decks that are not going all in quite as much, and they can still play Cold Blood because of a card like this. Being able to kill a minion and it re-stealths, and then your opponent, like say that their plan was to play a minion and then play Sylvanas because you played a minion alongside of it. You can play Lotus Assassin, attack it, get stealth again, and you play something else. Then your opponent plays Sylvanas. Maybe they can't couple like cheap spells with it. Maybe they can't hero power it or something. Like, this is a really strong card if your opponent's playing Azure Drake. Yeah, I'm liking it. Lotus Assassins, this is one of the stronger cards in my opinion. I'm curious to see if Rogue is going to be able to sustainably act as sort of like a play on curve deck, though. That's something that really worries me, is that Rogue traditionally has been a little bit more about using resources at the right time. Like, can you afford to play this card in a deck that you're going to use Edwin in as well? Because Edwin's sort of like the way that you win with Rogue, really. It's like you get so much win rate by simply drawing Edwin Van Cleef. I don't know. I'm curious. I think it's really strong, but maybe it had to be this strong in order to try to justify Rogue playing cards like this? I don't know. I don't know. I think it's good. I think it's good. I'm pretty sold. Can Sylvanas steal stealth minions? Yes, Sylvanas steals at random. It doesn't actually have to have a target to choose from or anything like that. So stealth, like, it's not like Yogg where Yogg can't target him because it has to target like a spell would. Sylvanas can just take it. You'd rather go face the rogue. That's something that's really true too as well, GW Coast, is that you do want to go face the rogue a lot. I mean, you need to set up kills on your opponent. And so the fact that Lotus Assassin, it kind of serves that double purpose though. Like, when you need it to be removal, it acts as removal, and when you need it to be damage, it acts as damage. I don't know. I'm okay with it. I think it's good. 6 mana 5/5 Battle Cry. If your weapon has at least 3 attack, gain +4/+4. It says Buccaneer, but he's not a pirate. Let me look up a definition here real quick. The first part of the definition of Buccaneer is a pirate. Why is this a pirate? Well, now I'm just mad. Go Google pirate definition or Buccaneer definition real quick. It was a pirate on stream? Ah, maybe it is a pirate. Now, there is an alternate definition of Buccaneer. I will say that. The alternate definition is a daring, adventurous, and sometimes reckless person, especially in business. There is an alternate definition, but the very first one is a pirate. Ah, I wish it was a pirate. It'd be kind of cool. Not that it would matter. I just want it to be a pirate. 6 mana for this? Holy crap. Maybe it's like a one-of sometimes when you just need to fight control decks with something big. Like, is this a way that we can maybe scale a little bit harder and actually justify like Ragnaros in some of these builds? It's going to be really hard for this to compete with like Gadgetzan Auctioneer. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's a pirate on the Hearthstone Facebook. Hallelujah. Woo! Thank the Lord for pirates. I don't know. I don't see it. 6 mana is a lot. 6 mana is a lot. See, it's like Draken and Crusher with An easier condition to fulfill. Yeah, the problem is, like, Draconiid Crusher is sort of like a product of needing to play dragons. And also has the upside. It's also a 6/6 instead of a 5/5. Yeah, I think this card's bad. It's really hard to do this. Like, you have to get your dagger +3 attack already. You have to be saving it, and then you have to have this guy. Yeah, no way. This guy's terrible. I'm pretty optimistic about stuff, too. That card's just not very good. 4 mana, 4/4, Battlecry, give a stealth minion +2/+2. Ooh. So if you play the 2/3, 4 mana, 4/4 sucks. If you play a 2/3, then you get this. You get to kill something, you get a benefit from it. You have a 4/4, you have a 2/3 that's now a, say, 4/2 because it attacks something. They kill your 4/2, you have a 4/4, you connect, you play Azure Drake. Hope they can't capitalize. Okay, I could see that happening. The problem is, how many stealth minions are you going to play in Rogue? And if you don't have that sort of opening, does this card actually ever get used? So, like, yeah, you can use this on the Lotus Assassin, but now it's not a 4-drop, and now it's a 4-cost card that you're dropping on 6. Yeah, I think this is bad. Rogue might be getting a little bit shafted in this set, but it's scary to give Rogue really strong cards, because they already have preparation. So if you give them too many strong cards, they can run away with the game. They already have Edwin Van Cleef, too. Rogue's not that bad. Gadgetzan, Ferryman. 2 mana, 2/3, combo, return a friendly minion in your hand. I guess if I want 4 Brewmasters, you got it. It's like my least favorite card in the set. It's kind of a cool design, like, as you get to choose. But sort of ideally, if you're building a deck with this card, you want to choose that, right? Not for me. Not for me. Get out of here, Ferryman. Get on out of here down the river. Counterfeit coin. Okay, well, this is one of the reasons why I think Rogue has gotten some weaker cards. This card's nuts. First of all, having the coin is already a good thing. Being able to cheat curves is something that's very powerful in basically every card game that you can possibly think of. And now when you're playing Gadgetzan Auctioneer, it's really easy to draw cards for free. The other thing is that when you're going first, SI7 Agent oftentimes goes way down in value against a lot of builds. But against aggro builds, now you have the option to just coin SI7 Agent on turn 2 sometimes. Sometimes you're able to literally just play a turn 1 Edwin because you have the coin and you drew this coin with Edwin. You just literally turn 1 a 6/6. This card's pretty nuts in Rogue. Like, if you put this in other classes, it's still really good. But in Rogue in particular, this is like a really crazy good card. The fact that you have preparation and you have counterfeit coin, I mean, you can literally make 10/10 Edwins on turn 1 sometimes. That's terrifying. Like, that's really terrifying. Oh my, this card is strong. Not only that, but like sometimes you look at hands with Rogue and they'll do weird things like preparation Fan of Knives simply because they need to do other stuff alongside of it. So sometimes this is just enabling turn 3 Tomb Pillager or turn 4 Azure Drake. And even when that happens, it's really good. This card's just good. Oh my gosh, I didn't even think about with Scrub. Solaron, you're a genius. You can just, like, when you're going first, you can, like, sometimes keep Defias Ringleader in your hand now. Like, imagine you're, like, going second, you're like, okay, this is good, I can coin out my 3-drop on turn 2, and then all of a sudden they're just like, this is our town, Scrub. You're like, you just put 4 power on the board turn 1. You haven't even done anything, they have 4 power. Oh my gosh. This card's great. This card's great. Woo! No wonder some of these cards are so bad in Rogue. This card's nuts. If this card doesn't see play, I don't even know what I'm going to do. Like Rogue might not be good. Rogue might not be good enough to get the job done. But if Rogue is good enough to get the job done and this card isn't part of that, I'm going to be astonished. And when I say astonished, I mean, like, come back to the stream, I will craft 2 golden counterfeit coins and just disenchant them if Rogue is played and counterfeit coin is not. Straight up. Straight up. Shadow Rager. 3 mana, 5/1. I hadn't seen this card yet. This is great. 3 mana, 5/1 stealth. That is just great. This doesn't do anything. It deals 5 damage. Maybe get some sweet aggro rogue stuff there. You just play it and attack him. It's really not that bad, honestly. Like, we used to play Wolf Rider in some of the old aggro rogue decks. Like, it was actually Backspace. He created, he was like the first person to create like the first working all-in rogue variation where literally you just try to kill your opponent. And we just played Wolf Rider. Just played on turn 3 and attack him. It was totally fine. This card's kind of like a ninja Wolf Rider almost. It's like you just play it on turn 3 and then next turn deals 5 damage. That's actually pretty good. Man, that's like really problematic for some classes too. Like, think about this card versus like versus Warrior, for instance. They literally just have to spend a card killing this, and they take 5 damage from it. Man, this isn't that bad. Think you take the 1 extra health of Panther? I don't know. 5's a lot. Maybe you're right about that, but I don't know. I don't think it's going to be good, but certainly interesting to think about. Anytime that you can, like, get through 5 damage a lot of times, that's, like, a really important thing to think about. Maelstrom Portal is probably the card that makes this not playable. Yeah, I will say Maelstrom Portal is definitely one of them. Butt Dog. I bestow upon thee 1 purple rhombus. Thank you very much, Butt Dog. Whoop whoop! 3 cheers for Butt Dog. Hip hip hooray. Is that 100? Does that count as 100 cheers, or is that 1 cheer? That's it. You're my first cheer, Butt Dog. You know that? Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Jade Shuriken. Okay, this card's cool. First of all, deal 2 damage for 2 mana is like something that I think that Rogue could use anyway. There's a lot of situations where you're looking at your hand and you're like, I need to eviscerate that knife juggler. Just eviscerate it, and then you've given so much information to your opponent. With this one instead, you just get to kill something, and you actually get something out of it. That's a really big deal sometimes, where if you can couple this with anything, you're starting to get that Jade thing building. And so I'm actually not sure if Rogue is strong enough to sustain the Jade thing. Whoa, Exarcoon, 9 months in a row. Forgot to hit the share button. Doesn't look like it to me. Fightless Moments and Fightless God Blesses. Welcome Exarcoon back to the esports gaming team with 9 months of time it would take to make a baby love. And believe it or not, that brings our weekly sub count up for the week. We are now at 17 of 18 subscribers. We just need 1 more to hit our goal. Hashtag Kappa, hashtag sellout. So yeah, we do have to do something a little bit on our own to make that 9-month Twitch baby, but you know, it gets the job done. That's what really matters, right? Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Exarcoon. Great with counterfeit coin. Ooh, that's a good one. Your opponent plays Flame Imp and you play counterfeit coin that. Woo! Woo! This card's cool. I like the Jade Golem stuff. Everyone else seems to not like it very much, but goodness, it is good. That card's cool. And right afterwards, we get another Jade card. 2 mana, 1/1, stealth, death rattle, summon a Jade Golem. Reels on stream previewed this today, and he played this on turn 2, and then he played Raptor on turn 3. And that's something that Raptor has really been missing, I think, for a long time, is a real goal in mind when you play Raptor. Like, it's cool to get extra death rattles, but now the death rattles are really doing something. Where before, it's like, let's just go look at the death rattles real quick and see what you would have done with this on curve prior. So, Rogue, on curve prior to this, you have Undercity Huckster. And if you go look at neutrals, you have Blood Mage, Lepronome, Huge Toad, Loot Hoarder. It's like just a bunch of garbage. Jade Swarmer is making another minion, and that minion compounds. So if you go turn 2 Jade Swarmer, and turn 3 you play Raptor, you're getting a 1/1, and you're getting a 2/2 out of the death rattles. And now the next Golem thing that you're going to play is a 3/3 instead. That's a much bigger deal than it would have been normally. Say you have turn 2 Jade Swarmer, and turn 3 you play Raptor, and then you have Prep Shuriken. You get to make a 1/1, you get to attack with the Jade Swarmer, and now your next death rattle is making a 2/2, and they're making a 3/3. That's a really big deal for Raptor. And that's like a part of Rogue, I think, that that has been really held at bay simply because there was just nothing else to do with that card. And now instead, you have some really strong potential. It's a little bit high rolly because you need to draw this on turn 2, I think, for that to be really effective. But man, when that's effective, that is really strong. This card can be really good. I could totally see like golems being played in Rogue literally because this card exists. If this wasn't here, I don't know if it's getting the job done. I really don't. Yeah, that card's great. Good stuff. So now we're moving on to Shaman, which Shaman... Here's the deal. Shaman got some really powerful cards, I think, but if you think about the existence of Shaman right now, a lot of these cards just don't fit into the current archetypes. And I think that's good. I think Shaman needs to move away from the incredibly linear one deck style that it has right now and be able to have some options open. And that kind of starts with this card. 5 mana, 5/5, taunt with Death Rattle of shuffle the Storm Guardian into your deck. The Storm Guardian is a 5 mana 10/10 taunt. So this guy just gives you a lot of big stuff for the cost of it. And as far as I can tell, this doesn't necessarily fit into any of the current Shaman builds. Like, this is not an aggro Shaman card. Right now, you already have Thunderbluff Valiant, and you have Azure Drake, which Azure Drake's actually like kind of a necessary part of Shaman because of the spell power, the way that it interacts with your spells being so important. And with Spirit Claws, Phantom Powers, just subscribe, Fireplace Moments, and Fireplace God Blesses. Welcome, Phantom Powers, to the esports gaming team. And believe it or not, that brings our weekly sub count up for the week. We are now at 18 of 19 subscribers. We just need one more to hit our goal. Hashtag Kappa, hashtag sellout. But this card really fits in sort of a unique way where maybe you can start playing a little bit more late gaming, because I don't think it necessarily fits into all the stuff you have there. Yeah, like the Bog Champ Shamans, for instance. Like, being able to double this Death Rattle, I think that could be actually really important in a lot of situations. Yeah, that card's cool. Lotus Illusionist, 4 mana, 3/5. After this minion attacks a hero, transform it into a random 6-cost minion. This is like Shaman's way to cheat the curve almost. It's like evolving itself. That's really cool. The only thing I don't like about this card is that it's cataloged. If this just turned into like a 6-cost Jade thing or Lotus thing, I think it'd be totally cool, but it turns into just a random 6-cost. Let me just get like Sylvanas and Cairn from this. Oh, no. Oh, jeez. Sometimes you get the 1/1. I forgot about that. There's a neutral 6 mana 1/1 now with the battle cry of summon the 6/6 little friend. Huh. This card seems really scary. You have to kill this card, right? I guess like if you have like Slam Execute, you don't necessarily have to kill it, but a lot of the time, I mean, like if you're playing against me, mine will turn into a 1/1 a lot of the time, yeah. But if you're playing against like random ladder guy X, or you're playing against like a Kalento or something, like Kalento's never getting the 1/1. You're always getting the 1/1. I don't know. This card's... This is a tough one to call. Oh my gosh. Is this the kind of risk you would take with Shaman? I'm going to be honest, man. I have no idea how to call this card. This is like... I mean, you have to kill this thing. The problem is, I guess it gets killed really easily, but that's something that Shaman does really well, is make sure that you get to clear the early boards. Like a Spear Claws, a Totem Golem, Lightning Bolt. I guess the hard part is going to be landing this on turn 4 every time. That's going to be the hard part, I think. Because if you're going to have Feral Spirit, and you're going to have Thing from Below, and you're going to have Spirit Claws, and you're going to have Lightning Bolt, that's going to be the hard part, I think, with landing this card, is that you're not always going to have it on turn 4. When you don't always have it on turn 4, it's easier for your opponent to kill. They're playing bigger minions, they're going to have more mana to access their spells, they're going to have drawn more cards, so they'll have more answers more frequently. Okay, I'm pretty sold. I don't think this is very good. And I don't think it's very good simply because it's hard to really consistently play on turn 4. Ah, gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I feel better now. I don't think this card is like insane. What up, playa? This right into Leroy. Oh my gosh, Mob, why would you... Wait, Leroy's 5 mana, not 6. So you could get Reckless Rocketeer instead. Yeah. I'm flying! 1 Flame Tongue Totem, you deal attack for 5, then you attack for 7. Boom, we built the OTK. Just add 1 Wind Fury to that. Boom! You're done. Finders Keepers. Once upon a time, I was at a grocery store, and I think I was like 24 years old, and the cost of silver had just spiked. It went from like it was up to like $28 an ounce or something like that, and I had just become aware that coins that were 1964 or earlier dated in the U.S. were silver coins. They were 90% silver. So like a quarter, for instance, had about 25 times the face value of the actual quarter. It was worth about $5. And I'm there to pour a bunch of excess coins into this Coinstar machine and just get, so that way it counts it for you and charges you a little fee. And this old woman in front of me has like a change purse. And she opens it up and she pours change in her hand and she just looks at it. And I could just hear the way it sounded and just look at the way it looked. And you could tell it was all silver change. And I go, excuse me, ma'am, before you pour that into the Coinstar, I want to let you know that those are silver coins you have. And they're worth about 23 to 25 times the face value of them. So that quarter isn't worth 25 cents. That quarter's worth more like $5. And there's a bullion buying place literally like a tenth of a mile away. You could just go give those coins to them and they'll give you 10 to 15 times what you would get by pouring in this Coinstar. She looks at me like I'm crazy. And she goes, well, if they're really worth that much, I just think Kroger deserves it. I'm like, Kroger deserves... First of all, Kroger doesn't even own the Coinstar. Second of all, they're not going to care. Like, it's going to get dumped into a vault, and they're going to count their money. Like, those coins are going to be lost to the next person who discovers them. Okay, so I'm already in my head, like, about to lose it at that comment. And I go, I'll tell you what. I will give you 15 times the face value of what those coins are worth right now. You have about $12 in change right there. I will literally give you $175 for those coins. And she's like, just looks at me like I'm crazy again. And she's like, I'm like, fine, just dump them into the Coinstar. Just completely lose $170. Your loss, I guess. So she starts dumping the coins into this thing, and she like drops like a quarter and a dime on the floor. So like $7.50 just lying on the floor, basically $7.50. I'm like, what do I pick up the 2 coins? And I go, excuse me, ma'am, you dropped these when you were pouring your change out. Go, just give them back to her. And she just looks at me and she shrugs her shoulders. Finders keepers. Yeah! That woman drives me nuts thinking about that. She just dumped $170 in this thing to get $10 back. And then when I try to give her her money, she tells me finders keepers. Nuts. And that's how Donald Trump got elected. So, discover a card with Overload, and you Overload for 1. This card's actually kind of cool. This will really increase the consistency to find, like, utility spells when you really need them, but it comes at a pretty significant cost, which is 1 mana this turn and then 1 mana the next turn. So I think it's a little bit much to pay for something like this, but to me, this is like a card I look at in the grand scheme of like all-in builds, where you're just trying to find damage at the end of the game. If you don't need damage, you're able to just get like a reasonable card like Totem Golem or Feral Spirit and keep building board presence. But if you need like a utility in the right spot, like, you're probably just not going to get this. So this doesn't really strike me as much of a control option as much of it does like a really all-in strategy where you're trying to just kill your opponent as quickly as possible and you just need that lightning bolt at the very end. But it can buff Tunnel Trog as well, so that's something really cool to note. Yeah, I think this is much more of like an all-in style card than it is like a utility toolbox style card. Jinyu Water Speaker, 4 mana, 3/6, restore 6 health on the battle cry, and overload 1. Well, this certainly isn't going in most of the Shaman builds I'd say that exist right now, but this could maybe change the direction that some of those go. Something that Shaman's already pretty good at is stabilizing at a relatively low life total, except against combo damage. So in certain matchups where your opponent's kind of like bursting you-ish for like 10 mana, I'd say, this is a situation where maybe this card is something that can slow it down a little bit. Again, my problem with this card is that it's 4 mana. It's really tough to justify 4 mana cards that are not like greatly impacting things. So I don't really see this card getting the job done. Like, this may be like a one-of in some of the builds so that you can just fight for the board a little bit stronger. Like, maybe you kill a totem golem and then like heal your guy back up. I don't really know though. Like, the fact that it heals yourself for 6 and has the extra health, I think it makes it a little bit better than Earthen Ring Farseer, but is that a desirable effect in the Shaman builds we have? Probably not. But if you're sick of playing mid-range Shaman, maybe this opens you up to playing something a little bit more the style that you want to play, which is like slower and try to choke out your opponent's resources instead. It's pretty cool. The Shaman used to have heals. Shaman used to have 0 heals, actually. Way back in, like, I think it was early beta stages, Healing Totem actually healed the player, but outside of that, they didn't have a healing card. It's better than Healing Wave or Healing Bot. That's true, but Antique Heal Bot was never really a card that was in Shaman, and Healing Wave is like a tech choice. That card can be a reasonable tech choice, I will say that. Reno Shaman, Jibated. Devolve. Transform all enemy minions into random minions that cost 1 less. Wow, this card's really weak. First of all, you have to have board presence, and your opponent has to have enough minions that are worth devolving. That's a difficult thing to create. Number 2 is you'd have to want to play this instead of Maelstrom Portal. Ugh. This card's awful. Yeah, I mean, what do you... I guess it's pretty cool, like, if your opponent's playing, like, a build that's really centric on... Well, you should just silence it, then. I guess the only time this card would really make sense is if your opponent's, like, trying to resurrect something or trying to, like, N'Zoth something. Yeah, it's really weak. I'm not going to give too much thought for that. Jade Claws, wow. 2 mana, 2/2, Battle Cry. 2 mana, 2/2 weapon. Battle Cry, summon a Jade Golem with Overload 1. The one thing I've noticed about Shamans, though, is that they don't really have a lot of strong Jade Golem cards. Like, that's actually the first one that's been referenced from Shaman. And the next one, which is the 7 mana 5/5 Battlecry, summon a Jade Golem and give it Taunt. This is a 7 mana 5/5. That's a lot of mana. That's a ton of mana. And then Jade Lightning, 4 mana 4 damage, summon a Jade Golem. Like, these are expensive cards to summon Jade Golem with. And they're not really, like, feeding into an overall game plan. Whoa! Oh, Harvey, 6 months in a row. Fireless Wellbets and Fireless God Blesses. Welcome, Oh, Harvey, back to the esports gaming team. And believe it or not, that brings our weekly sub count up for the week. We are now at 19 of 20 subscribers. We just need one more to hit our goal. Hashtag Kappa, hashtag sellout. Thank you very much, Oh, Harvey. But the cards are not feeding into, like, one central game plan. Where, like, if you look at the Druid ones, for instance, you're creating lots of mana. Or you're doing them for very cheap cost, and so you're getting these gigantic explosive turns. And with the Shaman Jade cards, it's kind of like a very slow building effect where it requires quite a bit to happen for this to really be good. Now, the weapon, I think, is good. The weapon is like a 2 mana 1/1 Overload 1 that summons a 2/2 weapon. That seems reasonable for me, but I don't really see like Jade Golem being the direction you go for Shaman. I think it's cool they have the option for it, because if you're just tired of Thing from Below, Totem Golem, and Thunderbluff Valiant, like maybe when all the cards rotate, they have like a more defined game plan with it. But so far, the Golem thing is not looking very strong for Shaman. And hallelujah so. I mean, Shaman is by far and away the best class right now. And then call on the finishers. Summon 4 1/1 Murlocs. So this card is really easy to talk about. It's super easy to talk about. In fact, I'll just look up the card that you talk about with it right now, which is just 7 mana. Everything is awesome. Cost 1 less for each Murloc you control. Is Call on the Finishers enough to make Everything is Awesome? Everything is Awesome playable? If the answer is yes, there you go. There's your deck. If the answer is no, next card. It's overall pretty weak. But yeah, it's Shaman did not really get a ton of help in this set, and rightfully so. Shaman is incredibly powerful, and people need to fight against it. So we're seeing this set, I think, affect that a lot more than we've seen previous sets do. When does Mean Streets of Gadgetzan hit? It actually, it's on November 1st. So this week we're getting it. Woo! Super cool. I'm super stoked. Yeah, Shaman's weak in this set. That doesn't mean Shaman's weak overall, but it's weak in this set. That's the big deal. Willie Dills, the host. Thank you very much, man. Screw Shamans. Amen. So Warlock opens up with, I think, a really interesting card here. 9 mana, 7/9, which seems to be like one of the big themes of Warlock, is that they have these incredibly powerful endgame things to do. Battle Cry, if your deck has no duplicate copies, summon all demons from your hand. Now, Cruel is a demon. I did see this earlier. This card is really interesting to me because the new Deathwing obviously wasn't enough to get the job done. 12 mana, 12/12, and when it dies, you get to pull dragons from your hand to play. Pretty tough for 12/12 to just die. First of all, it's hard enough to play it, let alone for it to die and then have that effect happen. This one just does it immediately, and something I think it's really cool to look at with this card is you can justify playing a lot of different demons that you wouldn't normally play in these style of decks simply because of the giant board swing that's available from a card like this. Now, that being said, this does come with some liability effects, which is, say you're playing against Control and you know they're playing copies of Brawl. You don't want to just play stuff into the Brawl. So against Control decks, this card can actually be a big liability. And I think that's really interesting because if you look at the Control matchups traditionally versus Warlock decks, the Warlock decks a lot of times are favored simply because of life tap. They get to draw a lot of extra cards and put together big burst damage. So now this is instead trying to take that direction of being so powerful versus some matchups that you need an effect like this in order to begin your closing. But against pure form Control decks, it's really just not that good. I think in a lot of situations you end up getting negatively affected by this. In terms of like when you're just fighting for endgame threats. So I think this card's really cool. I think it's good enough to see some play, but is the demon-centric build good enough to see play? That's really the thing about it, is this card's only as good as its surroundings in that effect. And right now, I'm not sure that's the case. So I think it's a really cool card, and I look more towards like Wild when I look at a card like this. And just getting like Mal'Ganis into play alongside of this thing, and then you just have like infinite stats for such a small amount, even if it's just 1 or 2 minions you put into play. But this card definitely seems like it's reasonable. Cabal Trafficker. I don't know if this doesn't look like a demon to me, so I don't think it was. But 6 mana, 6/6, at the end of your turn, add a random demon in your hand. My problem with this card is that there's too wide a catalog of demons. So, like with cards like Bane of the Doom, for instance, or is it just Bane of Doom? What's the 5-cost Warlock one? Bane of Doom, yeah. Well, like with Bane of Doom, for instance, the catalog you get, like, it's not really mattering as much, I don't think, except the fact that you have these really high spike potentials. But with this card, the high spike potential is really, really much lower. And it's mostly because it's going into your hand instead of into play, but then also because when you play a 6 mana 6/6 and you draw like Blood Imp, you have a worthless card in your hand, basically. So there are some cool stuff you can get from this, but I don't really see this being much of a game changer. I think overall this card's pretty weak. Now, if it keeps going, that's another story, but it's hard to do that. 3 mana 5/5. When you summon a minion, deal 5 damage to your hero. Whoa! I don't know. I don't know if this is good enough to get the job done. That's really big for 3 mana, though. I don't know. That's really tough. Yeah, it's whenever you summon. So if you summon random stuff, I don't know. Let's look at what does Warlock follow up with on 4 mana. That's a big deal. Man, like playing this guy and then Hellfiring? It's like, say you play this guy on turn 3, and then your opponent swarms the board, and they're like, I'm not going to attack that. He's just going to kill himself with it. And then you just Hellfire and attack him for 5? Fuck, that is really good. The problem is you have to have that exact same thing. And so with the way that Warlock is traditionally played, This card is really tough to use if you don't have a strong setup. So something else I look at is that, like, is this good enough to play, like, simply with Shadow Flame, where you just play it for 3 and then you Shadow Flame and you deal 5 damage to your opponent's board? Like, is that good enough? I could totally see this getting played. I really could. Like, he's even just, like, play it on turn 3, attack him for 5, and then Shadow Flame. I think that's reasonable. 3 and 5 is a lot. The other thing, too, is that this is, like, contesting Darkshire Councilman. I don't necessarily think this is a card you play in Zoo. But I think this is totally a card that you could play in more of the scaling builds, where you're trying to, like, just get big stuff and actually do something with it. Oh, you could Void Terror this as well. Would you take 5 damage if you Void Terrored this? Like, say you played this on turn 3, and then turn 4 you played Power Overwhelming, attacked him for 9, and then Void Terrored it, and got a 12/12. Would this deal you 5 damage? Does it proc when your opponent Hungry Dragons or Camels? That's a good question. Let's read Hungry Dragon. Summon a random 1-cost minion for your opponent. So do you summon it, or does your opponent summon it? That's a good question. Let's read Camel. Put a 1-cost minion from each deck onto the battlefield. So I don't think it will activate from Camel, because you're just putting it into play. I could totally see this card getting played. I really could. That's what I'm wondering, Whipsky. Like, because there's some like minor inconsistencies with some things like that. I'm really curious. I'd be interested to know that, because if if that doesn't happen, then maybe you actually have like some strong combos you could play. That card's overall pretty interesting. I wouldn't dismiss this right away. Don't dust this right away, because if this card ends up becoming like something that is really used, you're going to be really upset when you have to recraft this because you disenchanted 3 of them because you got a bunch in your packs that you didn't like. Yeah, this card seems reasonable. 3-mana 5/5s are tough, man. Like, Mukla gives your opponent 2 options, 2 extra options, and they affect the board position. And some decks had played Mukla in the past and been very good because of it. Certainly something you can consider playing in some situations. Bravo. Fellfire Potion. 6 mana, deal 5 damage to all characters. Just a bigger Hellfire. Not really much to say about this card. 5 damage to yourself is a lot. Don't know. I'm just going to skip this one because there's not really much... like, what am I going to say? Fellfire Potion. This card's so cool. It's like Hellfire, except bigger. Not much to say about this one. Pretty uninspiring card, but that's sort of the nature of Warlock, is Warlock has to have some, I think, naturally weaker cards because its hero power is so naturally really good. Curious. Sea Devil Stinger, 4 mana, 4/2. The next Murloc you play this turn costs health instead of mana. What Murlocs do we want to play? I don't know. Let's take a look. Ooh, Corrupted Seer? Oh, that's a lot of life. Wait, what? Why would we play this card? I guess let's give it like Biolfin Tidehunter, but then you're playing Biolfin Tidehunter. Yeah, this card seems bad. Why is this a Warlock card? Because that mechanic doesn't really fit in anything else is why? I don't know. That's kind of an interesting one. I'm curious. I'm definitely going to end up trying something like this. It'll probably just be failed again, but it's an interesting card. Blood Fury Potion. Give a minion +3 attack. If it's a demon, also give it +3 health. So this is like a weird Blessing of Kings. Ooh, this is really good on M-Gang Boss. Wow. Why is it wearing a cap? Oh, cape. Why is it wearing a cape? I don't know, because he's I don't know, he's magic. No capes! No capes. +3 attack. If it's a demon, also get +3 health. I don't really see using this over Demon Fire. Demon Fire's flexible. Now, that being said, this can hit like non-demon stuff too, though. So like, if you just have Knife Juggler out, you can just dome him. Oh, it's good with the 5/5. That's a good point, Zam. Yeah, there's some really... This is an interesting card. I think this is like... You read this and one of two things happens. Number one, you read this and you go, what, this card's terrible. And it's a little bit better than you think it is. Or number two, you read this and you go, wow, this card's insane. And it's not quite as good as you thought. I think overall this is pretty mediocre. But that being said, there is a lot to be said about the redundancy of effects like this. So, for instance, Demon Fire was hard to play before because it was just by itself, and it didn't have like the same reliability and consistency. That's a good point, Amnesiac. Where this card, because it's such a redundant effect now, you maybe can focus a lot more on Demon-style decks and actually rely on these cards to get the job done. That's really interesting. That's a good point. God, Warlock cards are so hard to evaluate. I think Warlock is like by far the hardest to evaluate. Like by far. Yeah, I could see that being reasonable. Yeah, also just stick it on Possessed Villager and like get him for 4. That's not like horrible. Abyssal Enforcer. 7 mana, 6/6, deal 3 damage to all other characters. Cards like this are always really interesting to me because I think typically when you take spells that are already played and put them on a body, that they tend to be pretty good. The only thing I see with this one is that you're sticking it on a body that costs considerably more than Hellfire did. So in matchups where you're going to want a Hellfire later in the game, like against Shaman, for instance, this card's pretty nuts. But against like Hunter, for instance, this card's pretty garbage. So that's something to really think about when you're playing cards like this. Like, this is the perfect demon, I think, to have in a Cruel deck, is where sometimes this card's going to be massively powerful, and when you don't have a use for it, you just stick an extra 6/6 body into play with Cruel. Yeah, this card's pretty interesting. I could totally see this being like played in a lot of Warlock builds, and the Warlock build's kind of tailoring more to like a scaling strategy than just an all-in Doomguard deck. Not bad. 6.5 out of 10. Blast Crystal Potion. People are like really hating on this card, and frankly, I don't really see it. 4 mana, destroy a minion and one of your mana crystals. So destroying one of your mana crystals is a pretty hefty cost in a lot of situations. But if you think about the way that Rito decks operate, you're going to Siphon Soul for one thing, you're going to have Twisting Nether for like another board position, and then after that, you're pretty much out of hard removal. And so when you have a card like this at the end of the game, it's really important to be able to play an important 6-drop and then also blast Crystal Potion in situations. So like picture playing against like a Druid, for instance, and you can't drop Reno when you're like at 18 because there's no reason to, and then you get to turn 10 and you're like at 12 or whatever, and they're playing Arcane Giants, and you get to blow up an Arcane Giant or a Malagos and then play Reno Jackson afterwards. Like, the fact that you have a very powerful removal option for late game is really what this card is speaking to. It's not necessarily the fact that it only costs 4 mana, or that it blows up a minion, because obviously on turn 6, this card's really not that strong. But in some matchups, even on turn 6, this is going to be fine. Like versus Zoo, for instance, if you have dismantled everything they play, and then suddenly they play Doomguard, and you have to Blast Crystal Potion it, that's not the worst thing in the world. It gives you like a double chance to draw it if you compare it just with Siphon Soul alone. So a card like this, I think, is like, it's getting so much heat from everything, from like the few opinions I've read so far, like on Reddit and seeing like people's chats and stuff. I think this card's totally reasonable. Like, if you're playing Reno, I'm trying to find a reason why this card's not in your Reno deck, unless you just don't need it. Like, if the metagame evolves in such a way that like this card just is not servicing a real purpose, that's when it's not played. But from the get-go, this card blows up Sylvanas, gets to blow up Tyrion sometimes. It's a totally reasonable card. Like, on turn 10, this has literally 0 drawback other than the fact that it only does one thing. On turn 9, it has almost no drawback. On turn 8, it has almost no drawback. This is a totally fine card. Yeah, I see it's definitely getting played a lot. It's not that you want to 4-mana Assassinate, because it's not fair to compare Rogue cards to Warlock cards in the same vein, because Warlocks don't have 2 mana deal 4 damage without discarding a card. Warlocks don't have Gadgetzan Auctioneer draw potential. Warlocks don't have Innervate. Warlocks don't have nearly the same damage potential that a Rogue does. And so comparing this to Assassinate, I think, is terribly unfair, because if you just put Assassinate into Warlock, they probably play it right now. If you put this card into Rogue, Rogue doesn't touch this thing. It's because it's a Warlock card. Something to keep in mind. 4 mana, 5/4, Battle Cry, give one of your demons +1/+1. We'll go ahead and skip on to Warrior cards now. Wow, this one's really cool. I love this card. Right away, Warrior is... I mean, this has to be like one of my favorite cards that's in the game right now. 2 mana, 2/2, Battle Cry, give all weapons in your hand and deck +1 attack. Wow, that is cool. This isn't like a super powerful effect, but the thing about it is this can add up to a lot of damage in some of the aggro warrior builds. You know, you think about how they oftentimes are going to hold Fiery War Axe until turn 3 so they can play it with let's say all demons. Give your demons +1/+1. Even still, like how is this better than Defender of Argus? I'll take a step back, but how is this better than Defender of Argus? Defender of Argus can buff like anything. This has to buff demons. This card sucks. We're moving on to the next one. Hobart Grapple Hammer. So like this is like giving you instances. Mind you, part of the reason Defender of Argus is good is because of taunt, by the way. That's the last thing I'm going to say about it. Is that getting taunt is really crucial to Zoo beating a lot of these matchups, where you look at Hunter, for instance. You can get raced down if your opponent just Unleash the Hounds and attacks you for 4 and you can't race against a kill command. When you're playing against Hunter and you play that 5/4, you have a stronger clock versus your opponent, but it's often not the clock that's mattering so much as it is the ability to actually stave off 5 to 6 points of damage. If you play Defender of Argus and they roll Huffer, it doesn't really do anything. If you play that weird demon card and they roll Huffer, you're probably losing the game. So those are definitely things to think about. More face damage for Warrior. I don't really think that that's going to matter too much in the long terms of things, because still, if you think about it against Warrior, it's not buffing Knife Juggler, it's not buffing Dark Peddler, it's not buffing Possessed Villager. Like, those are 3 important things to be buffing when you have Defender of Argus, because those are some of the things that stick around, is being able to play a cheap spell alongside of it, or having something stick to the board afterwards because of it. It's just not really that good. Das MG. Hope I pronounced that right. Fightless Moments and Fightless God Blesses. Welcome, Das MG, to the esports gaming team. And believe it or not, that brings our weekly sub count up for the week. We are now at 20 of 21 subscribers. We just need one more to hit our goal. Hashtag cap, hashtag sell out. Thank you very much. But yeah, this guy's like providing you some pretty significant damage in some of like the face warrior builds. Or even, I think a lot of times, this could be justifiable in some warrior builds simply because of just the ability to get extra damage down the road. You know, you think about like Gorehowl, for instance, that's an extra attack. If you think about in aggro builds like Arcanite Reaper, that card's dealing 12 damage now instead of dealing 10 damage. Little things like that can make a really big difference in some games. I think this card's really cool. It's like, again, this is one of those cards where, like, if you're like a super competitive player, sometimes you look at this and you'll be like, this is not very good. Like, what am I going to do with 1 extra attack on my weapons? If you're kind of new to the nuances of these games, you look at this and you really overvalue it. This card is not good, but it's not bad, and that's really the only way to describe it. It's just, it is a card that fits what it's supposed to do. Exactly that. Deal a little bit of extra damage when you draw your weapons. If I play Tentacle of Arms, does it work the first time or every time? That's a good question. Now I don't know. I am really interested to know that, though. That's a good question, T-Bear. Has anyone ever buffed a Tentacle of Arms or Tentacles for Arms and returned it to their hand? Does it keep the buff? Curious. Brass Knuckles, 4 mana, 2/3. After your hero attacks, give a random minion in your hand +1/+1. Ugh. What the heck? What is... I don't really see this being okay. Like, this seems just like garbage. Yeah, okay, I'll move on to the next one. I don't really see... Like, what are you going to do with this card? Oh, maybe it buffs your Cthulhu in a pinch. I don't know. Sleep with the Fishes. 2 mana. Deal 3 damage to all damaged minions. This is great at killing your own patrons. That seems like a lot of work to do if you want to kill damaged minions. My gosh. What sucks most for this guy in the picture is that he's not dying anytime soon because he's a Murloc. Like, he's literally just going to have to starve to death because he's shackled and in stone. That poor guy. God dang, that's brutal. Ravaging Ghoul, I think it's reasonable. Yeah, I can see it with Ravaging Ghoul. That's okay. The problem is it's taking up a full card in your deck, and like Warrior's one of the decks that I think is like hardest to really use too many tech cards in that are more like combo-ish cards than they are tech cards. Like Revenge, for instance, can do this by itself. Is that a card you want to have to wait to hold Whirlwind or Ravaging Ghoul for? Is that worth it accessing it earlier? I don't know. Yeah, I don't really see this card being that good. I think Revenge is just going to be better. This card, though, this card's really cool. 5 mana, 2/7 taunt. Maybe this could justify the Nux sometimes. 5 mana, 2/7 taunt. Whenever this minion deals damage, gain that much armor. Whoa, this card seems super cool. So something to really think about with this card is that if the metagame is slowing down, and a card like this becomes one of the reasons why, you're going to have to be on the lookout for Kodos. Because if you're playing a warrior deck and you play this thing and your opponent Kodos it, you are in really bad shape. Like, you just got BF'd. And you have another one of these in your deck somewhere. This is a really cool card. I think this card's really strong at fending off a lot of positions. And if you end up buffing this card in your hand, how much stronger does it really get? So that's like a question for Brass Knuckles. Is Brass Knuckles with this ever good enough to get the job done? The problem with that is if you have Brass Knuckles in this card and you have other minions in your hand, you're not always buffing this guy. Like, if Brass Knuckles got to choose the minion, I think actually it'd be pretty good. But the fact that you're playing this and it's going to get Kodoed or Cabal Shadow Priested or something, ugh. Or even just like Crazed Alchemist. Like, your opponent just Crazed Alchemist and kills it with a 2/2. I don't know. My first impression is this card was really nuts, and I think it might still be, but it's going to be hard to use. This is a really cool card, too, because this is going to really start affecting the tech choices that people are making, and that's when it creates openings for the aggro decks to really come in and be a presence. Black Knight comes back. I think if this card had higher power, like, maybe, but something to really think about is that this card's relatively low power and relatively high health, so a card like Kodo, I think, answers it a lot better. Oh, you still gain 7 armor if they Crazy Alchemist did. That's a good point. Bookworm buff. Yeah, Bookworm even. Yeah, I don't know. This card's going to be really tough to call, because I can see this being like a really big showstopper, but at the same time, there's plenty of ways, I think, to punish this. 5 mana, I don't think is quite crazy enough for this card to just be absolutely insane. Seems really good, though. I expect this card to get played, but I don't... Like, do you play this and Portal? Do you play this or Portal? Do you play this instead of Portal? Those are tough questions. Yeah, I like it, though. 3 mana, 3/3 Battlecry. Give a random weapon in your hand +1/+1. Wow, this is a pirate. This card would be really good. Still seems okay, though. It's hard to hold weapons for that long, but... You know, potentially being able to not play Upgrade and play this card instead, maybe that's worth it. Like in some of the Face Warrior decks. Just trying to deal a lot of damage. That's totally reasonable. Ooh, if you have Gorehowl, this deals 8 and then 7 damage to face. Ooh. Three mana 3/3 is not horrible either. I can see this being played. 18 damage Arcanine Reaper. I like the sound of that. Yeah. 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 Get them, Arcanine Reaper. Punish them. Yeah, this card I think is pretty cool. I think just the fact that the Face Warrior decks are getting cards that support it rather than just having to go all in on Pirates and hope that it's enough. Totally reasonable. Stolen Goods. 2 mana, give a random taunt in your hand +2/+3. Dumpster. Grimy Gadgeteer. 4 mana, 4/3. At the end of your turn, give a random minion in your hand +2/+2. Whoa. That seems cool. So something interesting I think to think about with this card is that this has some added value to it even when it gets checked immediately, but that value isn't immediately on board. So the times that this card ends up being really strong is when you can play it on turn 4. Your opponent has to like dedicate a resource to killing it on the following turn, and then you get to play like the Alley Armorsmith afterwards. So you end up with like a 4/9 for 5, and it already did something on its own. Like that's actually pretty important. The problem is you're not actually getting the presence on the board, and so maybe I'm just like in my old head, I'm like comparing a card like this in my head to like Pilot Shredder. But the other thing that this card can do is if it sits there for a turn, if your opponent doesn't kill it, like say in a control matchup, you're getting a lot of value from that card. And that's something really big to note. Four mana 4/3 is really weak though. Like, is that something Warrior really wants to do, is play a 4 mana 4/3? I don't really know. I can see this card being used. I don't think it's terrible. It's going to be terrible if they play turn 1 Flame Imp, though. That's when it's going to be really terrible. Yeah, if they play turn 1 Flame Imp, this card's dumpster. It's pretty good with, like, charge minions, too, though. Like, maybe you play this and you just play Core Chronically on the following turn. Or Leroy. Leroy's now 8 damage. Okay, I can see this card being played. Also with Dread Corsair. Buffing the Dread Corsair in your hand and then playing it with this kind of a weapon. Ah! Okay, I could see this card actually being used. It's pretty reasonable. Grimy Gadgeteer. What is he holding? Is that a gun? Is that like a sewing machine? I don't even know. What is that? Why does it have so many mechanisms on it? What are you going to do with all that stuff? Jeez, Lou. Wait, what? 2 mana 0/7 taunt. What? Why would you play this? If you want a 2 mana 0/7 taunt in Warrior, you just play Doomsayer. Like, I guess you could buff it in your hand and play it? That seems really tough. That's a very situational card. Yeah. I'm not going to give it much thought. That card's not good. I mean, this is clearly the best named card in the set. Just look at it and read it and think about it. It's not very good, but the card is just beautiful. Like, think about the effort to tell somebody that you know a guy. Like, in real life, you're like having one of those confrontations, you're like, I know a guy. I know a guy. So that'd be something really good or something like, it's like, that guy? Yeah, I've heard of him too. He's not very good. But when it's cool, it's just cool. Ah, this card's great. Not in terms of power level, in terms of design. Overall, this is just a very coolly designed card. I love this card. Alright, neutral time. Mayor Noggenfogger. 9 mana 5/4. All targets are chosen randomly. Well, this card sucks, but it's kind of funny. That's about what Noggenfogger Elixir kind of did. It just did weird random things for no reason. I kind of like it. I gotta take a quick bathroom break if you guys want to hang with me. We got neutral cards to go through. We've been through all the class cards at this point, but we still got plenty of neutrals to go through. So if you're new around here, I haven't been streaming too much lately, but that was because of my busy schedule. With the new set coming out and with my schedule being a little bit more cleared up in terms of work, I will be streaming a lot this week. So if you want to throw me a follow here on the channel, make sure you turn on the notification, because if you don't have notification on, you're gonna have to look through everyone you follow and then find me that way. And that's tough to do, and you have no idea when I went live. So the best way to do that is just notification. You get one single email when I go live. Bada bing, bada boom. It's done. But the best way to stay up to date with my schedule is going to be through Twitter. My Twitter is ThatsAdmirable, and almost everything I do involving games goes through Twitter at some point. So if that's something you're interested in, that is absolutely the best way to get a hold of me. It is absolutely the best way to like ask me for an opinion or anything of that nature. Twitter's going to be the way to do it. So I'm going to take a quick break and run to the bathroom, and when we come back, we're going to finish up on these neutral cards. Don't go anywhere, guys. You're watching Hearthstone, sort of. Why would anyone spend 9 mana playing this piece of crap? It's a good question, cool fool, but boo. The reason that someone would play 9 mana to play this wacky card is the same reason someone would play 10 mana to play a wacky card like Yogg-Saron. Now, the problem with Yogg-Saron was that Yogg-Saron was immensely powerful, and so much so that it was actually like unhealthy for competitive states. But with a card like this is a really wacky card that's really difficult for it to be like powerful in a competitive state. So if you want crazy things to happen, this is one of the ways to make that happen, where it's not going to happen all the time. It's not a card that's going to impact competitive play a lot, but if you're someone who really enjoys the game because crazy stuff happens, you have a perfect card for that. Mayor Noggenfogger. He's going to make weird and crazy and wild and wacky stuff happen. Wacky with an H sometimes. Madame Goya, 6 mana, 4/3. Choose a friendly minion, swap it with a minion in your deck. To me, there's not really much to be said about this card other than its similarity to Barnes in terms of where your immediate deck building style would go, which is you're trying to get some very major effect from this and minimize the amount of cost that you pay to do it. So in order to do that, you're going to have cheap minions in your deck, number one, to swap. So if that's the case, that means you're going to have some number of cheap minions in your deck to actually use with this in order to swap something out, which is taking away from the effect that you're getting something gigantic on the number of times you use this, except deep into the game when you've been able to draw most of your weak cards and able to use this flexibly. So something that comes to mind with this is like coupling it with like small time recruits from Paladin, where you're gonna like draw 3 of your 1-cost cards, so you're gonna have less of those in your deck, so it increases your chance to get like Ragnaros Lightlord. It's gonna increase your chance to get Tyrion, stuff like that. But a big problem with this card is, think about how many times you're playing Hearthstone. Your opponent just kind of kills your stuff all the way to step through, and you just end up on turn 6 needing to just play a 6-cost minion from your hand, which a lot of times that's just like, say, Sylvanas when your opponent has an empty board or you're a little bit behind, or like, say, Cairn is the only card in your hand at that point. I think it's really tough to use this card to maximum effect because it's such a situational card. First situation, you have to have something in play on your turn which you're willing to exchange. Second one is you have to be exchanging it for something good. And then the third one is the something good that you get has to be impactful enough to justify playing a 6 mana 4/3. So if you're one of those players who really focuses on these gigantic payoffs with giant risks, this is a card for you. It's very perfect for that purpose, where it's a difficult setup, and when it works, you are going to win games because of that. The problem is the success rate on this card. So from a competitive standpoint, I think this card's pretty bad. But if you're just looking, once again, for like big, cool stuff to do, this is a card worth exploring because of that. Wrathion, 6 mana, 4/5, Taunt, Battlecry. Draw cards until you draw one that isn't a dragon. Whoa. So sometimes this draws one card, sometimes this overdraws you. Huh. What can we do with this card? Other than just draw a bunch of dragons. I don't know. This makes Fairy Dragon a lot better, that's for sure. One of the big problems I've had with a lot of dragon decks is that when they end up drawing a lot of cards, like say from Curator, for instance, you just end up with too many cards in your hand and not really anything to do. And then getting to a turn like turn 6 like this is oftentimes requires you to just like fight on the board with like weak cards. So now if you're fighting with Fairy Dragon and the like, it's really not that bad because with this card you're able to just like maybe play 2 dragons on the following turn, maybe play 2 dragons on the turn after that. Or if you're, say there's like you've managed to come up with some particular combo deck where you're looking for a specific dragon, maybe it's something that can be really good there. Like something I'm picturing for this is like a heavy dragon build that has like Alexstrasza in it, and finding Alexstrasza is like a big part of your win condition, or say like finding Malagos or something like that. You know, maybe this could be like a way that heavy dragon decks can actually find a specific card sometimes. It's a little bit weak for the cost, and that's my problem with it. But other than that, this is an interesting card. This certainly can win games in the right situation. But it feels a little bit more random than anything else. Like when you're playing against Control Warrior, and they've maybe gashed you out a little bit, and you play this and you draw like 4 dragons or something, like you're gonna win a lot of those games. But in matchups where you're looking just to get the board presence under control, this card is not really gonna do that very well, I don't think. Right, it draws not only dragons, but it draws until you draw one that isn't a dragon. So if the first card you draw isn't a dragon, you get 1 card. So that's what I mean by this. Like if you're looking for a specific dragon card and you have a lot of dragons in your deck because of that, like I'm picturing quite literally like a dragon deck with Alexstrasza in it, like a Dragon Warrior, for instance. I think you have a much better chance of finding a particular card that way than if it was just like this. It has Taunt too, yeah, but 6 mana 4/5 Taunt's pretty weak. I don't know. This is one of those cards you're gonna have to implement a lot and see like how often drawing the cards is worth it. That seems tough to use. Finja, the Flying Star. 5 mana 2/4 stealth. Whenever this attacks and kills a minion, summon 2 Murlocs for your deck. Whoa. I can think of 2 Murlocs I want to summon. I totally am okay with summoning Murloc Knight from this. I'm totally okay with getting Murloc Warrior from this. This card seems pretty cool. Something that I think is really cool about this card is that it's kind of creating a board objective when it hits play. Now, your opponent doesn't really have a successful way to fight against the board objective a lot of times. But what they can do is it can disrupt them by forcing them to put taunts into play when they might not. It may disrupt them by forcing them to play a bigger minion when they wanted to play several smaller minions. And it offers you a potential very strong upside in a lot of situations. I think this card is pretty cool. Because the other thing about this is that this isn't just like a paladin card. So you're not just going to use this when anything can happen. This is a card that you could use with any number of decks that just want to put Murlocs in play. So if we just currently search up the Murlocs available, the Bluegill Warriors, that offers you a little bit of extra damage there. There's not like a ton of options though. That's a good point. So for this card, right now, its almost main purpose would be searching up War Leaders and Bluegill Warriors. Huh. I could see this card being... You know, I will say this. In Anyfin Paladin, I do think this card is justifiably played. Because one of the biggest problems I think that deck has had is just the ability to get your Murlocs. Like, that's something that I feel like that deck just struggles with. And its turn 5 really sucks. This plus call the finishers plus everything is awesome. Yeah, you could totally do that. This card seems pretty cool. I like it. Yeah, I'm a big fan of this card. I don't think it's necessarily that strong, but in the right situation, this card could be like game-winning. And to me, that's like a lot of what Legendary should be about. They're a little bit situational, but super strong in the right spot. Genzo, the Shark. 4 mana, 5/4. Whenever this attacks, both players draw until they have 3 cards. It's a reasonable stat line, but the problem with this card is that when you compare it to the other 4 mana cards that are out there, I don't think this is quite offering the same benefit that a lot of them are. And so cards that come to mind for me are like Fandral, Violet Teacher, and even Tomb Pillager, where if your opponent kills Tomb Pillager, you get something from it. If your opponent kills Violet Teacher or Fandral, the risk of playing it and having it live was so great for your opponent, they didn't really have much of an option for it. But with Genzo, if you end up playing this card and you're not going to end up drawing a lot of cards from it, it's really tough to really take advantage of that. And I think I learned a big lesson with cards like this from Jeeves specifically, where Jeeves' effect is actually a little bit easier to activate than Jeeves was. Where with Jeeves, you simply had to draw it and have less cards in your hand than 3 in order to get value from it. But with this card, you get to play it. Your opponent then gets to react to it and decide whether or not they want to let you draw with this at the cost of drawing themselves, or just kill your 5/4 at really no cost other than just the disruption effect to apply. Gilb81 just subscribed. Firepless Moments and Firepless God blesses, and welcome Gilb to the esports gaming team. And believe it or not, that brings our weekly sub count up for the week. We are now at 21 of 22 subscribers. We just need one more to hit our goal. Hashtag Kappa, hashtag sellout. But this card, I think, is just overall kind of weak. It's interesting, but this is a really difficult one to have activate. And this is just mostly a lesson I learned from Jeeves. The one benefit this has is that when you're going for a big card draw setup with Jeeves, it's really easy to attack Jeeves and just run him over for value. But with Genzo, it does have 5 power. So if your opponent's going to attack this, they're very likely losing their minion from it. Overall, fairly weak, though. Sergeant Sally. My goodness, this card looked really strong in the game that Dan played it today. 3 mana, 1/1, Death Rattle. Deal damage equal to this minion's attack to all enemy minions. This is like... I mean, this is just a Reno Warlock card mostly, where if you play this and then power overwhelming it, at the end of turn, you just deal 5 damage to your opponent's board. And the thought that you could have that on turn 4 is like terrifying to decks that want to go all in on the board. Like, picture a Shaman opponent who just swung the board around and then played Thing from Below, and you're playing a Warlock build. Well, now you just play Sergeant Sally and power overwhelming and pass, and they lose everything. Only PO can be played with it? I'm not necessarily sure that's the case. Because something else you could do with this, like in Warlock, is like really fringe situations. You might be able to Abusive Sergeant and Mortal Coil it or something. So the key to this card is being able to kill it really efficiently and being able to buff it at the same time. So what classes do that best? I think obviously Warlock's doing that the best, but yeah, I think it mostly is Warlock. So if you just look up stuff that deals 1 damage, it's mostly Warlock deals 1 damage. But maybe, like, is there any options for this in Rogue, for instance? Like, could you Cold Blood this and then Shiv it or something? I don't know. This card seems really interesting to me, though. This is an example of a card that, even though it's fairly narrow, is massively powerful when you get the payoff for it. And so that's to me the bigger deal about this. Yes, I know that hand buffs exist, but hand buffs are largely inconsistent because you don't choose them. And the other thing, too, is are you playing this a deck that wants to buff from hand, and then does that make it harder to kill? So those are things to think about. Oh, you can Interrage it, too. That's really interesting. Play this, Interrage it, it goes to 3 power, it dies. You could Cruel Taskmaster it. I think this card's pretty reasonable. Rockbiter plus Earthshock. Perfect combo! Bada B. Shamans needed more AoE, by the way. Yeah, I think this card's really cool. I think this is definitely a card that's going to find a home in some decks. Auction Master Beardo. 3 mana. It sounds like me. $3. Can I get $3 here? Auction Master Beardo right here is the 3 mana, 3/4. Who wants to pay 4 mana, 4 mana, 4? Can I get 4 mana over here, 4 mana? How about 3.5 mana, 3.5 mana, 3.5 mana over there? 4 mana, 4 mana, 4 mana, 4 mana. We're going once, going twice. Sold for 3 mana. After you cast a spell, refresh your hero power. What the fuck deck wants to do that? What the hell? Why would you use this card? Oh. Okay, so what the priest legendary from earlier, what's that guy's name? The 5-mana 5/5 where if there's no duplicates, your hero power becomes free? Ah! We've done it. We found the place to use this card. I think Beardo doesn't have a beard because he sold it at auction. That's what I should do. How much would y'all pay for the beard? Like, if we had an auction right now, like legitimate bidding. Heal for days. That's so situational though. First you have to have that card, then you have to have spells to cast, and you have to have this guy. That's a lot of stuff. Poison Blade. Shaman, you just have a card that does that for you. You just have Wicked Witch Doctor. To me, the most interesting part of this card, like, if he has like a really cool introduction sound, Frodan can just dress like this and host a stage that way. Or rather, Frodan can dress as he normally does and then host a stage that way. This guy's cool. He looks cool anyway. Not his card is, I think it's pretty bad, but he looks really cool. Respect. Oh my gosh, my favorite card. This is absolutely my favorite card in the entire set, possibly in the entire game. Oh my gosh, I love this card. This card is so cool. 1 mana, 1/1 charge. After you play a pirate, summon this pirate from your deck. Oh my gosh, I love this card! Ah! This card is so cool. So there's 3 things that I thought about immediately when I saw this card. So we're going to go through those in just a second here. But wow, this card is easily one of my favorite cards in the game. So the first thing is that you can gang up this card. So say you play a pirate and you get patches and you prep the gang up. If you play another pirate, you get 3 patches from your deck. That's so cool. That is so awesome. I love that. So good. Second thing to think about is the potential for this to deliver like some massive damage. So if you think about this card, with Southsea Deckhand, you're literally just getting an extra point of damage. Is there anything you can play where you would get patches and then buff your minions and attack your opponent? So picture like an aggro shaman deck, for instance, where you can play Southsea Deckhand, and then you get patches. And if you had 1 minion in play, you can Bloodlust and deal 9 damage. That's so cool. But if you play Southsea Captain, you play a 3 mana 3/3, and then you get a 2/2 charge from your deck. That's like a Southsea Deckhand. If you have Ship's Cannon with that card, that card is so cool. I love patches. This is like my favorite card in the entire game. Oh, I love patches. This is probably going to be the first and maybe only card in the entire set that I craft golden. The potential for this card in WoW is just insane. I love this card. And the thing that's awesome about this is it only gets better as time goes on. Oh, I love you, patches. If I had to pick a desert island and one person to spend the rest of my life with, it'd probably be Patches. If nothing else, just look at him. He's got to have some cool stories. Yes. God bless. Wind Up Burglebot. 6 mana 5/5. Whenever this minion attacks and survives, draw a card. It's pretty cool. It makes your opponent kind of kill this card instead of playing weak minions sometimes, but 6 mana 5/5 is really weak if it just dies on its own. I don't think it's worth playing. Next issue. Defias Cleaner. 6 mana 5/7. Battlecry. Silence a minion with Death Rattle. What card at 6 mana would not kill my 5/7, have Death Rattle that I'd want to silence? I can't think of a single 6 mana card that has Death Rattle that I'd want to silence that wouldn't kill my 5/7. I just can't think of one. I can't think of a single one. I don't think they exist. Frankly, I just don't think they exist. Here, let me try typing this into my client and see if this exists. 6 mana minion that doesn't kill a 5/7. Oh, Sylvanas! Oh, right. Cool. Yeah. Okay, yeah, I can see that. Yeah, this is a reasonable card. Okay, cool. Fight Promoter. 6 mana, 4/4. Battlecry. If you control a minion with 6 or more health, draw 2 cards. So something that's cool to note with this card is that if this is buffed in your hand and you play it, and it's the only minion you have, but it has, say, 6 health, you get to draw 2 cards. That seems pretty cool. I could totally see that being reasonable. Because you play this in Druid. I don't know. This card seems interesting to me. I could definitely see this, like, winning some games if you land this, but 6 mana 4/4 is really hard to play. Oh, gosh, you have to buff it first. I don't know. I'm going to call it a dud. Really close, though. If I'm wrong about that one, I'm going to feel really stupid. Isn't this just a worse Ancient Allure? Yes and no. I mean, it can just be played in non-Druid classes. Oh my gosh, Arcane Giant in this thing. Oh my gosh, this is going to be good, isn't it? Oh, Jade Golem in this... maybe it is good. I don't know. This is like when you pick up something on the radar. Like, you picture yourself in the submarine and things going around. It's like, boop, 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 boop. And it's not really moving. Boop, but you don't know what it is. Boop, boop. You got to keep an eye on that thing. It's not quite code red yet, but if things get out of hand, you need to deal with it. So that's something to think about. That's not a card I'm willing to disenchant, that's for sure. 6 mana, 6/6, Leather-clad Hog Leader. Battlecry. If your opponent has 6 or more cards in hand, gain charge. Cool. So if you're playing control deck, I get to hit you for 6. Doomsayer plus that? Oh, if your Doomsayer gets silenced. Oh, yeah. You're thinking ahead there. You're thinking ahead there. I like the way you're thinking about that. Yeah. It doesn't have 6 health if it's been damaged, though. Ah, okay. There we go. Leather-clad Hog Leader. Yeah, pretty... meh. Pretty meh. I don't really see that being a big deal. Yeah, I don't... That's... Yeah. Now, Burgly Bully, on the other hand. This is one that really intrigues me. 5 mana, 4/6. Whenever your opponent casts a spell, add a coin to your hand. This seems really good sometimes, and sometimes it just feels like it doesn't do anything. I will say that like a Questing Adventurer Rogue or like an Edwin Rogue would certainly, I think, thrive on a card like this sometimes. Where your opponent will have to use like multiple spells to do something, and then you just get to literally like go questing and like quest accepted and just start going crazy. You like play Auctioneer and keep drawing. I could totally see this being played in Rogue. Like, just to really exacerbate the situation where you're going crazy. And Mage 2, I think it'd be good in Mage 2. Like, something that Mage can really suffer from is just, like, little bits of spells and you're just holding on to fireballs. You have nothing to do with them. This card's really good. Yeah, I think this card's great. What about the card that refreshes hero powers after you cast a spell? Ah, you're thinking. See, that's the kind of stuff that I don't really catch right away. But when I think about that, I go, that's a good idea. Now, how many hero powers am I really going to want to use? Like, is that what I'm going to want to use my coins on? Would you run this and Counterfeit Coin? I cannot picture running a rogue deck without Counterfeit Coin, personally. I just absolutely cannot picture it. Like maybe like a weird aggro rogue deck that just can't afford to run it because your curve is so low. But man, this guy seems really good. It's not even like an unreasonable body either. At 5 mana 4/6, you're challenging other Azure Drakes. This is just like Trademaster Gallywix, right? So Trade Prince Gallywix, whenever your opponent casts a spell, you got a copy of that spell and you gave them a coin. And that effect didn't happen when your opponent cast the Gallywix coin. So you never got those coins at all. You just got a bunch of extra spells. It was more like a lopsided Lore Walker Cho. And when I say lopsided, I mean your opponent got a lot of coins and could just kill you with a chain of spells. But man, this guy's hard to kill without giving up some pretty significant value, unless you already have strong board presence. Now that being said, he's not really affecting the gameplay. Like if you're just playing this on his own and you need to dig or you need to affect the board state, it's not really doing either of those things. So I feel like the place this is going to sit is in a deck that number 1 can do something with the extra mana or the extra spells, and then number 2 is okay with just playing something on board and start attacking. And to me, that's just like, that's very rogue in general. Like where you can play Tomb Pillager, you get the coin, and then later on you find a good use for it. Whereas this card, you play it for 5 mana. Sometimes it dies, you don't get a coin from it. But sometimes you just play it as a 5 mana 4/6, and your opponent's looking at like Slam Execute, and they're like, what do I do? Do I Slam Execute this? Do I just start taking 4 damage? Like, Warrior can't just keep taking 4 over and over again. If your opponent's going to quality consecrate your board, you get 2 coins from that. Like, what can you do with 2 coins? Like, then on turn 6, maybe you drop a Ragnaros or something. I don't know. This card seems like it's really strong in some situations and really weak in others. Gilderin, I don't think it is. I honestly, I think it's a little unfair to compare the 2 cards because you're doing something so different with this card than you would be with Azure Drake. Where Azure Drake's presenting more of a threat, I think, than this card is in general, because the spell damage is something that you can use to real effect. So when your opponent plays Azure Drake and you respond by just playing more minions, oftentimes they can take advantage of the fact that you played more minions. So this is kind of like the opposite of that, where Azure Drake's, I think, a little bit weaker if your opponent can answer it with a spell, but this guy's a little bit stronger if your opponent has to answer it with a spell. But it's a little bit weaker if your opponent's playing just minions. It's not quite like Trogzor either, because Trogzor had to, number 1, it compete at the 7 slot with Dr. Boom. And then secondly, one of the major ways to deal with Trogzor was simply to brawl it away alongside a big board state. So when that was the case, your opponent could just brawl and you didn't really get that much value out of it. In fact, sometimes it ended up being weaker because of that. But the major problem with it was that there was already an immediate amount of board tension your opponent was building on turn 7. When you played Trogzor, they would just play Dr. Boom. So you'd get to hit them for 6, and then they had the 2 Boombots in the 7/7. So Trogzor got choked out of play mostly because of the cards it was competing with at that slot. And something about this card is that there are a lot of strong 5-drops in all of the classes, it seems. And competing with Azure Drake is already tough enough, but when you're competing with the extra 5-drops that have been printed that maybe have more specific uses for what you're trying to do, this card goes down in value a bit. I'm curious. I think it's strong, but I don't know how strong it is, honestly. I don't know. Maybe it does get the Trogzor treatment simply because there's so many strong 5-drops in classes now. Coin is a very big deal. Cool fool, bro. Mostly in Rogue, though. It seems more like a Rogue card to me than anything else. 3 mana 3/7 Felt Orc Soulfield. At the start of your turn, deal 2 damage to this minion. So this card, I think, is actually a pretty reasonable option for like other decks that want to be Zoo-esque and don't really have a strong 3-drop for that. So if you look at Warlock, they have Councilman and they have Imp-King Boss. It's hard to really play another 3-drop alongside of that. So with the Fel Orc Soulfiend, if say you're playing a priest deck and you want to just attack your opponent's stuff, I think this is a pretty reasonable option for that. It's mostly just killing 2 cards and then going from there. I think this kills 2 cards a lot. Frothing Synergy. Yeah, I think this card's pretty reasonable. Three mana 3/5 is pretty big. Even if you only attack with it once, then I guess sometimes it doesn't only kill one thing. That's tough. That's really close. Blubber Baron, 3 mana 1/1. Whenever you summon a battle cry minion while this is in your hand game. Oh man, why is it while it's in your hand? I guess because it'd probably be pretty disgusting if it wasn't. Yeah, this card sucks. while this is in your hand? What the crap? So if I go 1-drop, 2-drop into this guy, he's just a 3-mana 3/3. Dumpster. Dirty Rat. 2-mana 2/6, taunt, battle cry. Your opponent summons a random minion from their hand. So this is like a really weird card to me, where there are some decks I can picture playing this turn 2 against. But for the most part, that's like a death trap. Now, on the other side of things, picture yourself versus Druid, and you think they're setting up a Malagos combo on you. If that's the case, Dirty Rat can pull the Malagos from hand, and you can actually respond to the Malagos before they get a chance to combo damage you. Now, that being said, there is some pretty reasonable counterplay to that, which is just holding a minion in your hand. So if you have one super key minion, and then one minion that you don't need to play, Dirty Rat only has a 50% chance to pull that key minion from your opponent's hand. So the situations where this is powerful is literally either you're coupling it with something that sweeps the board potential away, picture like Brawl, for instance, or number 2, you can really start to pinpoint your opponent's hand because they can't afford to play a lot of minions, and you can disrupt a combo turn they're coming up with. How do you respond with 12 HP as Druid? Well, you probably just wouldn't play Dirty Rat and Druid if that's the case. You can mulch, but that's about it. This doesn't trigger opponent's battle cry, right? No, battle cries only trigger if you're paying the mana and summoning it. This is a weird tech choice. I'm curious to see what people are going to come up with to see if this card is useful or not. Because if Jade Golems have become like a really popular in-game strategy, this card just doesn't really do much. It's a really unique effect, though. Like, we don't have anything like that in Hearthstone. Like, is there anything that actually affects your opponent's hand in Hearthstone besides this card? Yeah, Maloxy, I'm just clarifying. I know I sound really brash a lot of times when I talk, but that's a totally legitimate question. I don't know. I don't know if there's another card that actually affects your opponent's hand in the game aside from this one. Ancestor's Call, that's a good one. Ancestor's Call really sucked, though. If that card really sucked, maybe this one really sucks. This does serve a different purpose, though. I don't know, really close. What the heck is this? 1 mana, 1/1. Weasel Tunneler. Death Rattle, shuffle this minion. What? What is this card? I just look at him. I don't even want to like try to beat anyone with this. I just want to see how many weasels I can put in someone's deck. This card is horrible. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. It doesn't do anything. Good God. That is great. I just want to gang up and try to put a bunch of weasels in their deck. Reno counter. You had to put 2 of them in their deck to be a Reno counter. I guess if you're playing against a Reno opponent who's trying to weasel tunneler you right back, yeah, it might be a Reno counter then. Good in the Zoth Raptor. You just discover him from Journey Belows. And you're raptoring them. You Baron Rivendare and you're ganging up in the weasels. Boom, just fill their deck with bad 1/1s. You drew the 1/1s first. Use all those cards. Bam, now sometimes they're going to draw dead cards. Second rate Bruiser. 5 mana, 4/5 taunt. Costs 2 less for each. If your opponent has at least 3 minions. Oh, that's pretty cool. That could like really put a hurt on Zoo sometimes. When they have power overwhelming, it kind of sucks, but yeah, that's fine. Not bad, not good. 5 mana, 5/5. Spiked Hog Rider. Battle Cry. If an enemy minion has taunt, gain charge. Oh my gosh. Wow, that card seems pretty cool. It's not bad, honestly. Problem is it's competing versus so much other good 5-cost stuff. This is a really strong set for 5-cost. I think that's one of the reasons you're going to see some things slow down a little bit, is because the 5 slot is just incredibly powerful with so many of these cards now. I'm curious like how strong the decks are going to have to be to combat that. Because the 5-cost cards are super strong and that powerful, I think you're going to see aggro decks thrive in a lot of these situations. Yeah, not bad. Doppelganger, 5 mana, 2/2. Summon 2 copies of this minion. It's obviously really strong to buff inside your hand, but this is just like really fringe. Like anything you buff in your hand is usually going to be pretty strong. This guy seems like it's just not very good. Imagine if you don't buff it in your hand. You just literally have a dead 5 mana card. Bomb Squad. This is probably one of the stronger counters actually directly to Sylvanas, like on a 1-for-1 basis. 5 mana, 2/2. Battle Cry. Deal 5 damage to an enemy minion. Death Rattle. Deal 5 damage to your hero. So, sort of like the actual literal main idea on this card is that you're playing Bomb Squad, you're dealing 5 damage to an enemy minion. If that minion is Sylvanas, they literally just take Bomb Squad and you get to deal them 5 damage later on, which I think is really cool. But you guys are pointing out Evolve as well, so you get to deal 5 damage with it and then evolve it. I could see that too. Oh, involved with the 2/2s. Oh, okay, I can see that too. That's pretty cool. Yeah, the thing about it is this isn't a random 5 damage. Like Bomb Lobber, for instance, a random. We're so used to those effects being like an isolation effect instead, and this isn't one of them. This is one just straight up gets to work that way. It's really cool. Bouncing it back to your hand. Yeah, I could totally see that as well. Yeah, that card's cool. Backroom Bouncer. 4 mana, 4/4. Whenever a friendly minion dies, gain +1 attack. What the crap? That's awful. Small Time Buccaneer. Has +2 attack while you have a weapon equipped. Whoa! What the fuck? That card's disgusting. Is this for real? Good God, this card is good! Oh my gosh! Wow! That card's insane! You just play this on turn 1, and on turn 2 you like play a weapon, or you play the Zoss First Mate, or you dagger up. You get patches. Oh my gosh, this card's great! Yeah. Holy crap, we might have some real pirate decks, boys. That card's sick nasty. Hell yeah, I love pirates. I mean, this has got to be one of the best pirate cards that's been printed, period. Could you Paladin? Look at all the weird Paladin weapons you have. Could you play Pirate Shaman? You have Spirit Claws. So if you play this to the left of Flame Tongue, oh my gosh, this is super cool. Oh my gosh, there's so many cool things you can do with this card. Wow, I love this card. Oh yeah, that card's great. Yeah! Big Time Racketeer. 6-mana 1/1 Battlecry, summon a 6/6 ogre. It's a pretty significant nerf to Moonglade Portal. That is a tremendous failure if that happens. You are really in bad shape when that happens. Yeah, you're in really bad shape if that happens, that's for sure. Not a very good card, but dang, that hurts. Ancient of Blossoms, 6-mana 3/8 taunt. Look cool. Not very good, though. Grook Fu Master. What the fuck is Grook Fu? I guess it's whatever he's doing. 5-mana 3/5 Wind Fury. Getting disenchanted. Apparently that's Grook Fu. The fuck out of here. Streetwise Investigator. 5-mana 4/6 Battlecry. Enemy minions lose stealth. I don't see a single reason why that would be included in my deck. Yeah, it doesn't seem very good. That's really bad. Red Mana Worm. 5-mana 2/6. Whenever you cast a spell, gain +2 attack. 5 mana, jeez. What on earth am I going to be able to afford that? I don't know. No, this is like a bad mana addict. Alright, yeah, that card's bad. 4-mana 6/3, eh? You got it. Hose and healers. I've got healers in different modes. Alicus, 20 months in a row. Good afternoon. God bless and well met, Alicus. And speaking of those, fire them up. 20 months of love back on the esports gaming team. And believe it or not, that brings our weekly sub count up for the week. We are now at 22 of 23 subscribers. We just need one more to hit our goal. Hashtag Kappa, hashtag sellout. My gosh, 20 months. That is ridiculous. Restore a minion to full health. Does that just outright kill it, Blastoise? That's an alright card. 4-mana 2/6 is pretty weak, but yeah, that's not going to get played. Kooky Chemist. He's kooky. Bill Nye the Kooky Chemist. 4-mana 4/4. Swap the attack and health of a minion. Yep, we got a 2-mana version of that. Daring Reporter. Whenever your opponent draws a card, gain +1/+1. Okay, so a 4-mana 4/4. Naga Corsair. Give your weapon +1 attack. Battlecry. Give your weapon +1 attack. It's a pirate. Why did I stop reading all the card text? Because some of this stuff is just bad. Is why. Like, some of this stuff is just like, you don't need to know what it does. Like Naga Corsair, for instance. I don't know. I could see this being played like maybe a pirate deck, but like some of this stuff is just like garb. Tenaris Hog Chopper. 4-mana 4/4. If your opponent's hand is empty, gain charge. What? That never happens. Oh my gosh. Backstreet Leper. 3-mana 3/1. Deal 2 damage to enemy hero. Well, apparently Leper Gnome was just way undercosted for what it did. This guy's not much better either. This is pretty considerably worse than Wolf Rider most of the time. 3-mana 4/3. Taunt. Okay, not really much to be said there. Toxic Sewer Ooze. 3-mana 4/3. Remove 1 durability from your opponent's weapon. I don't know if this is better than Ooze or not. I don't think it is. I think Ooze is way better. 2-mana 3/2 is way better than 3-mana 4/3. 3-mana 0/7 Street Trickster. +1. Spell damage +1. What the heck? Couples with that, the fight card. Fight Promoter. Ah, interesting. Stream keeps cutting out for me. Try turning down the settings on it from source to like a medium or something, maybe. Burns brightly. TRF6. If one of my mods could get a permit to TRF6, yeah, that'd be totally cool. Blowgill Sniper. 2 mana, 2/1. Battlecry, deal 1 damage. So the cost of targeting it versus it being random is 2 health. Ugh. It's also a Murloc, though. That's kind of cool. Maybe the Murloc helps a little bit. That seems really hard. Inner Fire. Oh, I didn't think about that. Inner Fire. Got him. 2 mana, 2/2. Battlecry, restore 2 health. Okay. Let's go to the next one. 2 mana, 2/3. At the end of your turn, restore 1 health to your hero. Okay, let's go to the next one. Seeing a theme here. 1 mana, 2/2. Mistress of Mixtures. Oh, that's good. 1 mana, 2/2. Death Rattle. Restore 4 health to both players. Wow, that card's great. Wow, that card's cool. Wow. Take that, Flame Imp. Yeah. Man, there's a lot of strong anti-aggro cards. I mean, the fact that it heals yourself is like a really big deal. Mason, what have you done? Yeah, that card's really cool. Wow, that's a great card. You just be able to play it and fight off early game stuff and keep yourself topped up. Or just like life tap twice in a row and then play that card. That's really cool. Yeah, that's it. Man, this set's great. I'm a really big fan of this set. I think you're seeing a lot of stuff like slow down. You're seeing... The only thing that kind of scares me is the scaling. Like, the Jade stuff seems really strong outright. But something I'm really excited about is that a lot of options are just being opened up. Like, there's a lot of stuff you can do just with like all the synergies you're getting. Like, you're getting real synergy to do stuff. And that's super important. I think it's like something that was like really missing from the game, was a lot of ways to synergize stuff that wasn't just outright too powerful. Other than that, but wow, Patches, this is by far my favorite card. 3 favorite cards of the set. Number 1 has got to be Patches. I think Patches is far and away my favorite card in the set. Not really much of a contest there either. Patches just makes me giddy. Next one, probably Counterfeit Coin. I think Counterfeit Coin is like, this is a card that just screams how Rogue works and what Rogue wants to do. And just the name of it. Like, everything fits this card so very well with what Rogue is that I think this is just overall one of the best design cards in the set. It's really hard to get more Rogue feeling than this, and it's also a very strong card. How many cards left unreleased? 0, Baked Snake. That's the full list. If you want to check it out, use the command MSOG in chat, and you can follow along with the same Hearthpwn webpage that I was using to view all the cards. They have them sorted by class, and you go from there. And third favorite card in the set. This is going to be kind of a hard one to choose, because there's so many good ones. My instinct is to say Wickerflame Burn Bristle. Not only because his name is art, just, again, this is like a very paladin-feeling card. Like, I think this is right alongside there with like the way some of these cards would work, but third favorite card. I'm pretty settled on Patches, for sure. Gosh, I don't know. I really like Kuhn a lot. I think Kuhn's just really cool. I don't know how much of a game changer it's going to be, though. It's really close. Like, so many of these cards are just cool. It's like stuff to do that you like normally couldn't do in the past. I'm a big fan of Ally Armorsmith, I will say. I don't know if it's like one of my favorite ones, but that card is really good. Probably the Weasel, honestly. That card is great. It's so bad, but it's so great. Just look at it. Do you think there's a problem that the fact that counterfeit coin is strictly worse than Innervate? I don't think it's a fair comparison, because if Rogue had Innervate, it'd be disgusting. Like, Innervate and Rogue would just be, like, nuts. You have to consider, like, the way that cards work from, like, a class standpoint. This is, honestly, Small Time Buccaneer is probably my third favorite one now I'm looking at it. This card is just great. This is everything I want to do with Pirates. This is so beautiful. Papa Kron, I tell you what, now's probably a bad time to do that, because I'm probably going to be closing up the stream. I feel my voice giving out just a little bit, because I didn't warm up my voice. But when the set comes out, I definitely want to do that. So, when does the set come out? Is it Thursday? Yeah, so the set is out on Thursday. If you want to come back by the stream on Thursday with that, I'm more than happy to like start looking at decks and evaluating them, and like, but I need to experience some of these cards before I can give a really good sense of what things are going to be like, because I have no idea what other people are going to do right now. And having not played any of these cards, we may find out some of them are just not very strong, and that some of them are exceptionally strong. You know, in practice is always very different than just looking at a list and theorizing it. But if you want to come back on Thursday, I'm more than happy to do it. Will I be streaming more, please? Probably not today. My voice, like I said, is giving out a little bit. And right now, I want to play Hearthstone, but I want to play with new cards. So, next couple of days, I'm probably not playing much Hearthstone. But in terms of just like general streaming, I hadn't been streaming just because my stuff was so busy. Cards released on Thursday, December 1st. Yellow Elof. December 1st is when they're released. So if y'all wanted me to stream more, I'd be playing non-Hearthstone at that point. But for those of you joining me, if this is your first time, thank you very much for coming by the stream. The last 6 weeks have been tough for me to stream just because I've been so busy with my work schedule. But now that things are a little bit more defined, I can get back to streaming a little bit more. So I'm really excited about it. If you guys want to throw a follow to the channel, it's obviously a good way to stay up to date with stuff. But if you turn on notification, you'll get an email every time I go live on the channel. And that is by far the best way to know when I'm going live with stuff. And Twitter is also a tremendous asset for that. Anytime I'm updating anything I'm doing, whether it's casting, whether I'm competing in anything, whether it's updates to stream schedule, just thoughts and stuff in general, the best way to do that is going to be Twitter, and then the live notification from Twitch, where you get an email when I go live. The schedule might be moving around a little bit. I do want to start streaming a little bit earlier. So I'll figure how that's going to go. I don't know if it's going to be a longer stream or if it's going to be like a stream in the morning, maybe a stream in the afternoon, and go from there. But that's what it was. Man, Mason, I've missed y'all too. It's been, through October and November, I spent 27 of 31 days on the road. And that's brutal. I love being at my own house, in my own home, with my own bed, not having to worry about stuff, eating the food that I want to eat. You know, that takes a big toll on you. And it was tough to stream on the road just because the hotel internet was not stable enough for it. In a lot of situations. I mean, I bought a laptop literally so I could start streaming while I was on the road, and it just didn't work that well. Thank you, FF42. I have the white, blue, black one, or the white, black, green ones right there, and I intend to put the blue and red ones right here in front of me. Just coincidentally, there wasn't enough room to put all 5, and those just happened to be my 2 favorite color combinations. It worked out perfectly. Are you 1 follow away from the goal? 1 subscriber away from the goal. Followers, I'm about 500,000, but subscribers right there. What archetypes do you think Warrior will have this expansion? Or will some cards thrive the current ones? Rocker, I think that Control Warrior is still pretty much always going to be a thing, but I think a lot of it depends on how much of popularity like the Jade Idol picks up. It's going to be really hard to fight against the Jade Idol strategy with a control build, since you're trying to fight off all of their threats until you hit an inflection point. But with Jade Idols, that doesn't really seem to slow down that easily, so curious about that. GeoGuessr. Probably not playing GeoGuessr. New expansion will come out how many days from now? It's coming out on Thursday. So it's tomorrow, the day after, and then Thursday it's going live. No followage command. I know I have like some sort of command for that. I don't know what it actually is in MooBot.